Good evening, everybody. Happy New Year, Christine. Give everybody another minute.
Megan, when you want to start, you do have quorum.
Thank you, Secretary Peterson. All right. I think I just saw one or two more people just jump in, so let's let everybody get settled. Awesome. All right. I am going to call to order regular meeting 1356 of the Wachusett Regional School District School Committee, held tonight, Monday, January 11th, 2021 at 7 p.m. We're meeting remotely tonight via Google Meets. This meeting is being recorded and is being televised on Holden Cable TV and on YouTube. If you are also recording any portion of this meeting, please do let us know. We are meeting tonight remotely per the order of Governor Charlie Baker, moving some open meeting law regulations back in March of 2020. First on the agenda tonight, we are actually going to be passing over agenda item 1, which is our executive session, and agenda item 2, which are the recommendations requiring action by the school committee. These items of the agenda will be ready to be discussed at our next meeting, which is January 25th. So I do ask tonight, as we move forward, that everybody keeps their camera on, is part of our discussion this evening, respectfully listens to one another as much as they speak. We will be adhering to our 2 minutes per person per agenda item discussion order. Please do wait until you're called on to have your comments, and please do make sure you do your best to listen to others. We're going to start tonight with public hearing. As the committee knows, and many of the members of our public know, we have worked with Director Sklar in order to revise the way that we are collecting public comment during the pandemic and remote meetings. So this week, Director Sklar put live a Google form on the WRSD.net website in which community members would be able to fill out with their first and last name and address, as well as their comments. This seems to be very well received, as we have 38 comments to read before going into meeting this evening. So I do ask all of you to listen carefully to the public comment session this evening. We do have a second public comment session at the end of our meeting, and so I will check the Google Meet spreadsheet towards the end of the meeting if anybody wishes to add public comment during the meeting tonight. With that being said, I'm now going to move to public comment. First tonight, we hear from Eric Greenwell at 10 Maple Street in Sterling. Nothing has improved since the decision was made to remain on full remote learning. As much as I would love to have my daughter back in school, please do not bow to pressure. You have made the correct decision so far. Please delay opening again until at least March to allow the situation to improve. Next, we hear from Yuet Tai at 51 Lexington Circle in Holden. Health officials said the school committee meeting back in November that hybrid should not begin because of the rise in cases in 5 towns. Since then, cases have gone way up. If it wasn't safe to start hybrid in November when the numbers were lower, why is it safe to do so now? Also, are there consistent 6 feet social distancing within the schools as recommended by the CDC? The November school committee meeting said the schools did not have consistent 6 feet distancing in place. Next, we hear from Rachel Catlow at 34 Beeman Road in Princeton. The safety of our children, teachers, school staff, and administrators is the highest priority. It is not safe to be gathering when the virus is rampant in our state. Hybrid learning should be delayed indefinitely. In-person will only increase the caseload. Next, we hear from Angela Squire at 6 Cider Mill Lane in Princeton. I have concerns about going back to school. Although I'm remaining remote, I worry about teachers and peers that will be attending the hybrid plan soon. Some students have already tested positive for COVID-19, and it is very likely that more will test positive, especially because of the current spike in cases. I do not think it is safe to go through the hybrid plan until the vaccine is distributed. Next, from Christine Baez at 109 Autumn Circle in Holden. Why can most of the state offer hybrid learning and why choose it can't? Next, from Stacia Hemphill at 20 Birch Drive in Sterling. Wondering if district is going to take advantage of pool testing that the governor is setting up for public schools. Said first 6 weeks will be free for all school systems. Can participate if your school intends to set up hybrid. I think we should take advantage of the initial 6 weeks for free. Said can us federal money given to schools to pay for additional testing after the initial 6 weeks. Says it costs 75% less than individual tests. Can do groups of 20 at a time. Believe there will be info emailed to district and a call next Tuesday to go over necessary information. Next, we hear from Erin Pickett at 361 Chapel Street in Holden. Dear Dr. McCall and school committee members, one of the main reasons my family, like many others, moved to this district was its reputation of having a strong school system. Fast forward almost 18 years, and I'm truly wishing that we chose any of the number of surrounding districts that haven't failed our children this year. A strong school system will not let their students suffer the way that we've let ours suffer. Their mental health is crumbling, and the academic needs are not being met in the current model. Dr. McCall and the school committee's sole goal right now needs to be getting kids back in school buildings, not in 4 weeks or 8 weeks, but on January 19th. Data has proven minimal COVID transmission is happening in schools, so there's no reason to keep them home any longer. Districts of comparable size have made it work, so we need to do the same. No more excuses. Thank you from Erin Pickett, parent of a 10th and 7th grader. Next, we hear from Allison Spar at 30 Sandy Ridge Road in Sterling. Per Governor Baker's educational announcement today, there should be no question about the return of the students to our community in-person learning on the 19th. As Baker stated, there's an overwhelming body of scientific research that show that in-person learning can be done without spreading the virus regardless of community transmission rates. Baker mentioned this has been evident in parochial schools, with many located in areas with high transmission rates. Many districts, not including our own, have already been bringing kids back to classrooms. Baker stated, unfortunately, still too many are either remote or in complicated hybrid programs. Per Baker, the evidence is clear that in-person learning is essential to kids' educational, developmental, and emotional well-being. Per Secretary Pizer today, medical experts have confirmed that when standard health protocols are followed, schools can get back into in-person learning even without universal testing. Commissioner Riley also discussed the option of pool testing. However, this is not required for in-person learning. As a representing body of our community, it's a responsibility to the school committee members to advocate for our children. It's start to hold the administration accountable to get our children back, including my own special needs child, are being denied their right to FAPE. They are continuing to fall further behind. Please be our voice and advocate for children. Do not let the administration bring in their so-called experts in the field persuade your opinion. As a healthcare provider myself, I question the validity of the experts presenting to school committee prior to the last anticipated reopening. I ask the members of the committee to take a closer look at the hybrid program being rolled out to the administration. As stated today, schools are operating in complicated hybrid programs. It appears that when children are remote learning as part of the hybrid program, far too much asynchronous work can be provided. You can't expect most children, especially the elementary level, to carry out work independently without the assistance of a teacher. Some students won't even have the support of a parent. The children deserve more. They deserve synchronous learning on their home days. Please ask about the hybrid plan in regards to the amount of synchronous and asynchronous learning. Thank you for your time and your assistance for caring and advocating for the children of our community. From Allison Spar. Next, from Jennifer Kremer at 151 Nola Drive in Holden. Those of us working in pediatrics are in the majority in favor of our kids returning to in-person learning. The benefits of in-person and hybrid learning encompass much more than academics: access to resources, food, safe adults, etc., social emotional learning, structure, and security. Having provided medical care to children and families since the beginning of the pandemic, none of us felt completely prepared for COVID. Nevertheless, our kids need to follow through with the COVID policies put in place for classroom learning. Our community is counting on you to address your reservations and provide the education, resources, and support to our children desperately needed during these times. Jennifer Kremer. From Sue Stowe at 154 Blair Drive in Holden. With numbers rising, will students be starting hybrid 119? Also, I've sent multiple emails requesting Chromebook Assistance for 2 middle schoolers. And in August, I was told if we had a device to take our names off the list to borrow one-to-one Chromebooks would be coming soon for middle schoolers. In October, I emailed that our Chromebooks were not sufficient to support the small amount of online work they were assigned. We have Charter come out, we have sit down and restarted everything we can. They are older and slow. I have emailed the superintendent as well requesting one-to-one Chromebooks. I still have not heard back. With additional classes in the new schedule since November and assignments they need to do on their Chromebooks, when will we be receiving adequate devices? From Wendy Sanders at 12 Malvern Hill Road in Sterling. We think numbers are too high to send kids back. We need to wait until more people are immunized. From Sandra Tobert at 8 John D. Road in Sterling. My 10th grader has been thriving with fully remote schedule. Starting school an hour later has been a godsend as well. As the school goes back to fully on-site this year, I feel it would be best to offer fully remote option for homes like ours where we want to avoid all exposure to the virus and have no issues with remote learning. Thank you. From Karen Valcare at 17 East Park Road in Sterling. All students and staff should be remote. Infection rates are high and deaths are high. The new strain could spread like wildfire through a school population. Why would we take these risks? From Allison London at 150 Nola Drive in Holden. I would very much like our children to have the opportunity to go back to school. Research indicates the likelihood of kids getting COVID in school is very low. Research also indicates that kids are struggling in terms of mental health. I should know, I have a PhD in education and psychology. My expertise is in adolescent development, and I've taught adolescents health at Holy Cross for 15 years. So many towns have done this successfully, and our kids have been deprived of the opportunity to go hybrid. Many of us feel very strongly that we should have the opportunity to do hybrid if we would like. We need strong leadership, great advocacy for what's best for kids, and more parent input. Keeping kids fully remote increases health and educational inequalities. Not all parents have the opportunity to work from home as I do. The longer we stay at remote, the greater disadvantages become. Thank you. From Deanna Homoliski at 277 Quinnipiac Street in Holden. If we're moving forward with full return to hybrid despite community spread being so high and hospital resources being stretched so thin, will the district be considering the funded pool testing program Governor Baker announced? With teacher health and safety a big concern until vaccinations are available, this should be something seriously considered by the district. From Kristen Turner, 469 Shrewsbury Street, Holden. To members of the Wachusett Regional School Committee and District Administration, as of today, Monday, January 11th, our district has had 305 days to prepare to get kids into buildings. I ask you today, as I asked you before, how many more days are needed? How many more consultants, meetings, documents, matrices, arguments, motions, amendments, and votes are needed? I'd also ask, are we not in school because of current metrics or because of lack of preparedness? Are schools prepared and waiting for students with desks lined up at 6 feet, stations for sanitation set up, distance markers on the floor, bandwidth capacity, and sufficient PPE? Or there's still a list of outstanding items that need to be completed? If our schools are not ready, why are high-needs students in an unsafe and unready environment? Why are sports continuing unhindered? What is on the list that still needs to be completed? How can the community help? If the schools are ready and we're not at school because of metrics, why are other schools with similar or worse metrics in school with little to no school transmission? Or are we basing our decisions on metrics when other decisions are instead deciding on a case-by-case, school-by-school, in-school transmission assessment? It's popular to say that we shouldn't worry about our students falling behind because it's a pandemic after all, but I can tell you as someone who teaches in person every day, our kids are falling behind. Leave my house each morning and go teach students who live 20 minutes from here in a district where K-5 schools have been back in person since the first week of school. Cases that do come up in school have few close contacts because of the protocol and mitigation procedures put in place. Our elementary schools that didn't have remote days after break, but instead went right back to school, not waiting to see how bad things got, but instead maintaining our strict protocols to keep everyone safe. How can it be so unsafe here and not there? Why can't we do better for our children? A year ago, we would have agreed that children shouldn't spend too much of any time in front of screens. Now we're a full year on screen school now. Our children deserve better. Their parents who have quit or lost their jobs, given up on career advancement, or had to hire help to support this district deserve better. We are falling behind. Thank you for your consideration. Next, from Julie Hurley at 444 Marshall Street in Paxton. As we are approaching the hybrid start date of the 19th this month, which is, as of today, we mark 10 months after the WRSD not only had no in-person learning, but also failed to deliver a plan. I'm sure I speak for others when I say the time we've lost is irreplaceable and can never be recovered. I've written to the committee numerous times. I'll remind you that I have a kindergartner and second grader. Both are not excelling as they should in person. Let me ask the committee, are your children doing remote in this district? Have you moved districts for any of your children? Do they go to private school? What is your vested interest in getting kids back? Sure, the numbers have skyrocketed. Some of which are your teachers that are part of the growing numbers, you realize, right? Hope you've done your research that shows children are not spreader of the virus. The children are not thriving in the environment because they have anxiety. When it's mentioned, well, you guys will not be returning to school now, and they respond with, I want to stay home. That's not good. It's not the new normal. Get the kids back to school already. Enough damage done. Do the right thing. Regards. Next, from William Leahy at 166 Bullard Street in Holden. Dear Chair Weeks, I have made a written request to Dr. McCall per school committee policy P1660 to have an item placed on the agenda for the regularly scheduled meeting on January 25th. The public has had no opportunity to hear discussion about the teacher's statement of no confidence. Members of the school committee has requested a discussion of the statement be to add to the next agenda. Yet several meetings have happened without the topic being added. I believe the public deserves transparency from our local elected officials, and I'd like to be able to hear a discussion of what concerns teachers have. Yours truly, William Leahy, Jr. From Melissa Martin at 310 Marshall Street in Paxton. I'm writing you today in regards to the SOA funds that the school committee will be voting on. The SOA funds that the district received were targeted for special education. As I look at the proposal, I see that funds are geared towards social emotional needs. While that's an important area, we need to apply the funds where they were targeted to go. Our special education children have suffered and lost much since the pandemic started. There are many areas in which funds can be applied to directly improve life of special ed children. There's staff that can be hired and trained in many areas. I ask that the committee not approve the funds and in turn ask administration to review their proposal and gear the funding towards special education children. These children are who the state directed funds to be spent on, and they should be receiving the benefit of these funds. Thank you. Jeanette and Joe Apple at 236 Newell Road, Holden. Our son is graduating. What is the plan to get kids back into school? Enough is enough. The COVID situation has been high and won't change for a while, and other districts have been open. We demonstrated horrible leadership, and our kids haven't been in school since March. This is unacceptable. There's absolutely no evidence when the kids will get COVID. Holden numbers are up and kids aren't in school. The state will have pool testing. We got a consultant and voted and made a decision, and I'm sick and tired of the school committee and the superintendent changing their minds. The superintendent needs to stop bringing people in, people with opinions biased on his side, to speak on calls. Many of us are exceptionally well read and don't need wrong information. Demonstrate leadership and do your job. The schools need to teach in person. Parents are worried they can stay remote. It's like some parents don't want to send kids to school, but don't want to make anyone else make our own decisions and send ours. Personally, I saw the plan for seniors. It would be another atrocity these seniors did not have a semblance of a senior year, given that these kids haven't been in school. Sports were played, but the kids didn't go back to school one day. Where are the priorities? Get these kids back to school. There'll always be a risk, as there'll always be a parent or teacher who aren't happy. Do what's right. Mendon Upton has been hybrid, Shrewsbury's been hybrid, Northborough's been hybrid. It's an embarrassment and atrocity that Wachusett students haven't gone to school. The psychological damage that's been done to some Wachusett students is on the decisions and poor leadership of our superintendent and the inability of our two large school committee to make decisions. From Elizabeth Bennett, 9 Osgood Road in Holden. I first want to say thank you for all the members, the superintendent, and others who have put countless hours into preparing our schools to return on the 19th. I say this with confidence, as if you had over 300 days to prepare for this. Schools should be ready. They can't sustain this much longer. Time is now. Schools are open, and ours should be open as well. No more excuses. From Mellon Shurtleff at 107 North Row Road in Sterling. Which response level will we be at according to the decision matrix on January 19th? From Debbie Jackson on Autumn Circle in Holden. Please be clear on the reasons for schools to be closed. Multiple surrounding towns are hybrid and it's working well. Having a ghost date is misleading and creates hope. If the school's not planning to open due to money, logistics, or whatever reason, be transparent. Transmission rate in schools is clearly not something that's shown to be a threat. If we follow proper protocol, what's the challenge? From Gary, I'm sorry, Gary, I'm going to pronounce your last name wrong. Heskluck at 126 Jennifer Drive in Holden. Dear Central Office Leadership and School Committee, I'm writing to express my ongoing disappointment with the district administration and school committee as it plans to return to in-person learning. I've been observing the ongoing process and discussion since the summer. I agree that our district scope does present unique challenges, but these characteristics should not be insurmountable. However, like many, my patience have diminished and my frustration has increased. As a parent, educator, and community member, I feel that remaining silent and not expressing my concerns would signal to the school committee the course of action is acceptable. However, in a time like this, I am reminded of John F. Kennedy's quote, "There are risks and costs to action, but they are far less than the long-range comfortable inaction." I hope this sentiment rings true. As an educator working in a district 25 minutes away from Holden, I want to share that my district has been in person in a hybrid model since September 29th. Our elementary students have been in person from the onset of the year. The work to prepare the school this summer was relentless. However, there was a goal, a vision, and a drive to provide opportunity to our students. It took the work of a superintendent, school committee, multiple leadership teams, ongoing feedback, and teachers' contribution. In fact, it was 4 simultaneous plans that had to be developed: a remote plan, a hybrid plan, a 100 capacity model, and a standalone remote for those who cannot attend in person. The goal of the work was to have the ability to shift from one model to the next. Admittedly, when we began this process, most of us assumed we'd be remote by Halloween. However, we're still hybrid due to safety protocols, cleaning measures, testing, and community commitment. In addition, there are discussions within my school district to have students back at 100% in the spring. Not to mention, there are some school districts that are already back at 100%. I recognize there are committee members who are currently teaching under a hybrid model in their respective districts. I'd like to hear their voice about the value of having students in person. I've yet to hear how their school districts have successfully opened. Maybe they can use their own experience to help drive policy. As I sit and watch the committee meetings, I'm consistently reminded that the body can be driven by fear and not facts. I've heard that contact tracing would be extensive and complicated. Yes, it is. When a positive case comes into the school, it's anxiety-provoking and consumes health teams day and night and weekends. I've heard concern about staff needing an extended absence because they are a close contact. Yes, this happens too, but the staff circle the wagons for one another and teachers and administrators have become creative. Of course, I've heard this concern of in-school transmission. Again, the data across the Commonwealth has been consistent and the rate is minimal. If there were high rates of in-school transmission, it would be the district's responsibility to return to a remote model. This shift was a change for all school districts. Lastly, to those who feel it's still unsafe to have their children return in the classroom, the district will have a standalone remote program. If these are the reasons for decision-making, I cannot support this line of thinking and rationale as it runs contrary to my own experience in dozens of other districts. Suppose other mitigating factors are driving this current policy. In that case, I implore Superintendent McCall and members of the school committee to have a level of transparency to support this current plan if our children do not return to school on January 19th. Although this letter is intended to share my disappointment, I want to publicly thank our teachers and administrators for their continued efforts, creativity, resourcefulness, and under the most trying circumstances. I have been nothing short of impressed with their ongoing commitment to our children. I feel that on the district's current guidelines, our school is using, our children will return to school just in time for MCAS, and at worst, not till the end of the year. I ask the school committee approve and finalize the plan to return to in-person instruction on or before January 19th. From Jean Gao on Holbrook Lane in Paxton. Dear Dr. McCall and school committee members, first, I want to thank you for the difficult work you've done to weave through this extraordinary time. I can certainly appreciate the many tough decisions you've had to make in your guidance and planning. I need to express my concern about the schools returning to hybrid instruction. I've been in district a very long time as a music specialist and seen many ups and downs, but there's nothing been as serious and deadly as this has been, as we know. With being an older employee and then in the light of high COVID numbers in my town, I am very concerned about returning to the classroom, the likely possibility of COVID being brought into schools, and teachers, staff, and children becoming sick. My getting sick is not my biggest concern, as I have a very compromised husband at home. I am greatly distressed and concerned for him and would be devastated if I got him sick in this process. In light of the vaccine being available to teachers very soon, I implore you to hold off the return to school until we're better protected from this deadly virus and when our towns are no longer in the red. I know I'm not the only Wachusett employee feeling anxious and concerned. Thank you for your time, Jean Gao. From Allison Boring at 5 Arline Drive in Rutland. Are the kids go to school? From Eric Knowlton at 235 Myrick Road in Princeton. Parents and families have been in the lurch on everything related to the return to school since last summer. Several last-minute decisions have been made by the school committee in support of the continuation of all remote learning, despite the fact there is no data specifically related to in-person learning to support decisions. In fact, the opposite is true. We have evidence to report in school learning. We know it's much safer for kids to be in school versus remote. When kids aren't in school, kids, families, and school staff are compensating for it by congregating in other settings. 80+% of infection occurs in social settings, not schools. It is more disappointing that this district has been unable to pull a plan together to provide 2 days of in-person a week for the most vulnerable youngest grade levels. A 5 or 6-year-old can't learn comprehensively via Zoom, not to mention the social emotional that are suffering. We are one of the few districts through the state that have zero in-person learning, nearly 1 year ago. Everyone recognizes that these issues are complicated and no one would envy your position, but this is a clear failure of administrative committee leadership. Because it's hard doesn't mean we can't find a way to support a better way forward. If the school had to be open to survive, similar to a business, we would most certainly be in a different position. If we're waiting for all risks to be removed, we're not living in reality. Lastly, we cannot end up in a position like last summer where the entire off-season appeared to be wasted and we stumbled to the fall without a plan. Anyone who cares about students and learners versus interests is banking on full in-person learning by this upcoming year. So make it your priority before you break for this current school year. From Barry Delicacy at 28 Patriot Way in Holden. Members of the school committee. At the time of submitting public comment for this, we're at day 305 since our kids have been in school. The district's plan is for the kids to return on January 19th under the details previously shared by the school administration. However, there's a lot of speculation and probably would be worded as expectation across the community that a motion would be raised for the school committee to vote on further delay. I'm commenting today to call on you, the school committee, to keep the plan as is. Yet the community positive volumes are at the 2.5% metric that Dr. McCall established under risk level 1. With that metric itself, we cannot expect to return to school, never mind any full-time this year. You must look at the examples of countless other districts of being able to return safely. This includes single towns as well as multi-town districts. This includes districts that have fewer schools, staff, and students, and those who are bigger than Wachusett. There are many members of this community, including school committee members, who work in other districts that have gone back. The data shows that schools are low transmission sites when the proper protocols are put in place. This is why Governor Baker and DESE continue to recommend in-school learning. Of course, this is predicated on safe protocols in place, followed by staff and students. And I trust with the 305 days we've had, our administration has done everything they can to prepare us. And Dr. McCall has indicated we are ready. I also understand there's no right answer for every family. We all have to make the decision that's best for our situation. For our family, we're desperately hoping our first grader and fourth grader can get back to school this year. Please give us this option to do what we know is best for our children. Thank you for the opportunity to speak publicly on this matter. Just give me a moment. A few came in a little later and are on a spreadsheet. Okay. Next here tonight is Kristen Palco at 117 Wachusett Street in Holden. The continued remote learning has taken a toll on my elementary age children. We're getting through it until recently. My fifth grader has become withdrawn and lacks motivation. My fourth grade daughter is continuing to experience depression. We're doing everything we can to support our children, but they need to return to the classroom. Continuing remote would be detrimental to my children's mental health and future learning. Next, we hear from Christine Penzoni at 92 Jameson Road in Holden. Even though that I know our numbers are up from previous months, I still push you to open schools. As stated in various studies, COVID transfer in schools is low. For many students, being in school with mandatory masks, distancing, and disinfecting is safer than shuffled amongst learning centers or being left to their own devices. I work in a district that's been back hybrid since the end of September. Cases have been minimal, and only one is linked to school transfer. Most come from activities or decisions families make outside of school. The students are suffering through all of this. The teachers in the district, especially Davis Hill, are going above and beyond to give them a meaningful experience, but there's a limit to what can be done remotely. My daughter's teacher is amazing when working with her students. Being a teacher myself, I'm often in awe of how she handles her class of second graders who are all on different paces and just shouting out. However, these students haven't even met their teacher in person or walked into their classroom. This is a big deal for the building's teacher-to-student relationships and for young learners. I know for many, including my daughter, their love of going to school is starting to change. In addition to loss of learning, the desire to even go to school may affect them. I'd really like to push the vote for schools to return to hybrid learning on the 19th. Next, we hear from Tom Rosoff at 67 Prospect Street in Rutland. Please allow our children the right to attend school. The lesson we're teaching our children is that when things get tough, we hide. We need to try to make up hybrid learning like other communities. We're no longer the norm, but the exception to the point of people are suffering are the kids. Educationally and emotionally, they're suffering, and it is not fair. Next tonight, we hear from Shannon Lapowitz at 482 Wachusett Street in Holden. Our daughter is a first grader at Mayo Elementary. She's doing well remote, although is beginning to lose interest. I'm writing with concern for her social and emotional health. She's an only child. We tried the best to accommodate as many outdoor socially distanced visits and virtual play dates. We speak to family in different districts.
Megan, we can't hear you well.
See if I can get a little closer.
That's better, thank you.
Okay. We do our best to accommodate as many outdoor socially distant play dates. She speaks with family and friends in different districts and states regularly, all of which have returned to in-person learning. She asks a good question. Why can they be safe in school, but I can't? Answer me that why. As the months have gone on, her bright spirit, sense of adventure, and imagination has diminished. She is angry, emotional, has begun talking back more and more about needing to return to school as opposed from wanting to return. She recently wrote a letter to her grandparents who support us with remote learning, stating that she loved them, although she did not want to see them as often as even though she hasn't seen them as often as she has. She goes on to say that she misses her friends. It has been disheartening to listen to recent school committee meetings and listen to ongoing debate on metrics, remote teaching plans, and logistics of transportation. The debate continues within our district as many other schools have return to hybrid or in-person. Many of these districts have had no outbreaks or clusters. This will happen and it will be okay. The continuing debate as whether or not it's safe to return has to end. If waiting for cases to stabilize, the children of our district will never step foot within our schools. The teachers are doing an amazing job. Truly they are. We owe our children so much more though. Finally, this evening we hear from Mary Shepard, 1320 Wachusett Street in Holden. Dear Chair Weeks, member of the school committee, and residents of Five Towns tonight, the WREA would like to clarify some misleading statements made by Dr. McCall in his response to our letter of no confidence made during the meeting of December 7th. First, it's worth remembering that the WREA statement of no confidence is not something we arrived lightly at. Our membership voted to condemn district leadership after careful thought and deliberation. It's also worth noting our statement came after Dr. McCall narrowly escaped no confidence censure from school committee. Currently, there's a statement of no confidence circulating that originated organically from parents. Context matters, and giving all three key stakeholders felt it necessarily to formally undergo the process of a statement of no confidence speaks volumes. First, Dr. McCall tried to deflect responsibility for his lack of leadership by stating that many other districts are facing hardship. Though this is true, many of the comparable districts of our own have had no experience at the same levels of dysfunction and transparency as we've seen in our district. For example, Shrewsbury had a well-crafted return to school plan since early June. On multiple occasions over the summer, the WREA met with Dr. McCall, the district negotiations team, and asked them to consider a reopening plan that addressed the entire district, not just ESY summer services. The request was rejected. WREA suggested that the WRSD use large parts of other district plans that were well thought out and be easy to negotiate in a manner that would benefit students. As members of this committee and also parents are painfully aware, Dr. McCall did not create a reopening plan that was shared with community stakeholders until September. We would invite basic reviewers of the catalog to revisit catalog of past school committee meetings to see how many times Dr. McCall was asked to be more transparent and share basic information, only to repeatedly disappoint members who made their displeasure known. Next, Dr. McCall attempted to blame the lack of funding in our district to the state funding formula. Though we agree with Dr. McCall entirely that the funding formula is flawed, this is a misdirection. Parents and teachers want answers to big questions about what reopening was going to look like, nothing related to the budget. Nothing from the budget was stopping Dr. McCall from adopting large sections of other districts' reopening plans to use as foundation. Again, the WREA suggested that we do this back in June to avoid having scramble in the fall. This never happened. In fact, Dr. McCall was absent without reason for 3 out of 7 bargaining sessions this summer. In addition, Dr. McCall referenced his push to hire a deputy superintendent chiefly responsible for organizing and developing PD as an indicator that he is competent. This position was actually the result of a grievance filed by the WREA because teachers were worried that the district was not offering a pathway to recertification through mismanagement of PD. It was not the brainchild of Dr. McCall. Additionally, it's worth noting since the deputy superintendent was hired, PD concerns remain. It may surprise members of the committee to learn that at the high school, there's only been one district PD offering during Wednesday half-day since September. Even when teachers are informed of PD, it's been poorly planned and communicated at the last minute. Fourth, Superintendent McCall audaciously claimed credit for having contacted an outside environmental specialist to examine health and safety of the HVAC systems. This was a demand made by WREA. Dr. McCall had no intention in bringing in an outside specialist to test air exchanges and fought against those measures at the bargaining table. He also fought against specific metrics the WREA proposed that are based on CDC and WHO data that would indicate if the air was unsafe because HVAC systems were not functioning properly. Put plainly, the WREA was disturbed by Superintendent McCall's misleading response to our statement of no confidence. We cannot in good conscience allow his dishonest remarks to continue to mislead the committee and public at large. Thank you for the opportunity to offer this corrective rejoinder. Sincerely, the WREA Executive Board. That is public comment for this evening. Again, if members of the public have additional comments that they would like to include, you may go to wrsd.net and include your comments on the Google form, and I would be happy to read those at the conclusion of our session this evening. And thank you everybody for writing in. I know it takes a while to read these comments, but it's worth it. I'm happy to see so many people want to get involved in our schools. So I applaud you guys for taking the time to do so. Next on our agenda tonight, our chair's opening remarks. Hi, you've heard a lot from me tonight already, more than you probably want to hear, but I have a couple things I've written down tonight myself. I myself am in quarantine for COVID right now. Thankfully, I have taken a negative test and hope to remain negative. I did receive transmission at school at the place of my work, and we are currently remote based on that transmission. But I want to remind the committee tonight and the public tonight, thank you for all your comments, but reopening is not on our agenda tonight, and I specifically did not place it on the agenda. We as a committee voted to open our schools on January 19th, and barring any direction from our boards of health today, that is our intention moving forward. While we may provide updates to this, and I'm hoping the superintendent will provide some updates in regards to his meetings with the boards of health today, we don't have to re-vote to take up a vote that we've already made. So unless we were changing our minds on reopening, there was no need to re-vote on something that we have already approved. On a positive note tonight, and I'm really excited for our two presentations this evening, we're going to have the chance to hear from our COVID committee task force with Natalie and her nurses. And then we're also going to have a chance to hear an MCAS presentation, which really showcases the pride of our district and the strength of the people that we have here. Student rep Kate has already made this presentation to management. It was wonderfully thought out and articulated. So I'm excited to hear from her this evening as well. So as a committee, despite all the measures that, provide us challenge right now, we do take pause and understand that there's great work happening. And I think Natalie's task force and Kate's presentation will give you an opportunity to at least smile twice tonight. So thank you. As part of my opening remarks, this was the most logical place to put the COVID community task force all the measures that Natalie, are you with provide us challenge right now.
I am. I'm here, Megan.
Awesome. Take pause. Yes, I can very well. Do you want me to put up your PowerPoint, or is that something you want to do? And Kate's
actually, that'd be great. So the only
to at least smile.
The thing that I find displeasing about Google Meet is the inability to see people while you present.
So why don't I pull it up to put if you want COVID community task chatting on measures that Natalie, are you with us?
So I just want to say thank you so much. Again, after the unanimous vote last time that we had, I just thought there was great value in saying, okay, thank you for your support, but here's what we're doing. I heard my name a couple times on the last meeting, and I wanted to say, yeah, through the screen. So thank you for a couple moments of your time to provide an update on where we're at, and hopefully we're able to provide value to the district. So
we're almost there on presenting. So just a few more seconds. I'm getting the a spinning wheel of doom.
Yeah, I have it up too, Megan. So as long as people, I guess it's not really like I have to see everybody's face, but
I want you to be able to interact with everybody in case they have questions for you as well. So give me a sec. I don't know why I'm running slow tonight. I'm usually the Princeton internet is the best in the district. Okay. Got it. Okay. Can you see the tab?
Yep. Oh,
all right.
There it's coming.
It's coming.
Awesome.
Okay.
So just a reminder, a refresher. So where we last stood, everybody unanimously voted. Thank you again so much to school committee and also working with Brendan and administration and together. Some of the biggest things, just to refresh, were overloading the local boards of health. They certainly have a lot and now even more things on their plate. So where I wanted to stand, since we met, I had a really great turnaround in terms of people saying, pick me, pick me. So part of the process was figuring out who's going to do what it's probably really hard for you all to see here, but basically as a result of our last conversations, we were able to disseminate resources throughout 3 main veins from the last conversation we had. The first one being supporting the local boards of health, the next one being supporting school nursing, and then the last one, when Brendan Keenan and I had a conversation, it was more so just how do we take these conversations and really become a voice of the community, and how can the administration school committee best utilize us. So we have been working with the full group. We're meeting bi-weekly to discuss, are there any other things we can do to be having conversations surrounding school nursing? Are there other things we should be doing to support school, the boards of health? Is there anything additional we can do to become kind of the voice of the community to feedback to school committee and administration? So that's kind of the first step we did. And then on the next slide, I just wanted to do a deeper dive in terms of what we're doing to support the local boards of health. So we've been in communication. We've offered assistance to all 5 towns within the Wachusett region. So currently Holden and Paxton have been engaged with us. So one thing that we had a little bit of it took some time, was standing some of the volunteers up in Maven, which is the state, it doesn't matter what it stands for. Basically, it's where we're tracking all of the cases. So anytime there's a positive case that comes in, it, as we've discussed, can be quite a challenge to, first of all, provide timely communication to the people who are positive. And the purpose of that timely communication is remediation and containment. So, and of course, information. There's a lot of people that are scared and confused. And where do I go from here? You know, am I 10 days? Am I 14 days? Am I 7 days? Am I 5 days? There's just so much information. So we've been working with Julia, and we've got people now onboarding in Maven, myself included. And then we have 6 volunteers that are currently in the process of training. I myself have been onboarded in Maven as well. Rutland, Princeton, and Sterling, we reached out to, and they're actually being supported by the Wachusett Medical Reserves. So I requested engagement with that director just to say, hey, how are you all doing, to see if they need any additional support. So that's where we stand with the other 3 towns. So right now we've already completed, even this is outdated, so it's over 213 calls to people that have either tested positive in our community, or the other work effort is discussing inconclusive testing. So not every time do you get a positive or a negative. Sometimes you get a call saying, we don't have a result for you. It can be contaminated by the lab. There's so many different reasons. So both of those do necessitate a next step. So the positive surrounding conversations of, what do you need to do now? How long do you need to quarantine? Do you need help? Do you need resources? How can we provide those to you? So those are some of the things and conversations we're having in multiple languages with our communities. So I'm really excited to say that we're helping there. And then we've also been supporting the school nursing effort too as well. So in conversations with Brendan, he had mentioned the biggest thing that they really need help with is staffing the sub pool. So our committee and task force has really put together, we circulated the flyer provided by Brendan in 4 of the local hospitals, 2 local schools of nursing, and 3 private practice facilities. So I know that we have 3 nurses alone on our actual community task force, and myself, that have applied and plan to apply for the task force. And we've completed outreach to 5 actual local districts too, for lesson learned from the school nurses. So we've actually received a bunch of information, a wealth of information from other districts that was really helpful. So the last thing, updating just the voice of the community. So the biggest thing that a lot of the community members and from the task force itself brought to me was just, how do we have our voices heard? So, you know, Megan, to you, God bless you for all the conversations and reading of those public comments. But I think a lot of people are just wondering the issues after the matrix. You know, there's a lot of questions surrounding the matrices. What does that mean? There's still a lot of questions and concerns in just how we're communicating. So our task force was made aware that there is a COVID reopening task force that we'd love to be a part of and see the meeting resume. I think the reopening task force had done great work in providing a plan, but we are of the mindset that going forward, that task force will have new challenges as schools do reopen. So I think it's really important to have a fluid feedback cycle. So we'd love to be able to continue to provide that feedback to administration and the school committee, and how work together, how do we better inform the community. So that was the biggest thing that kind of brings me to my next step. So we've been able to control what we can control, like working with the local boards of health and supporting school nursing. But where do we go from here? The biggest opportunity for improvement we've seen and talking to the community is partnering together on, I think the word transparency came up many times tonight, but there's just a lot of the problem seems to be disparate, confusing, untimely communication surrounding COVID-19. There are still a lot of questions about the matrix and what does that mean? I know it hasn't been publicly posted. So the biggest crux of that is, how do we work together to provide a format that people feel both heard, and then the problems that are currently questions and problems start to become solutions and answers. So what we recommended, or what we discussed, was perhaps more meaningful information posted to the website, or maybe in an easier to read way. Perhaps, I mean, these are just questions, you know, or suggestions in terms of how we could partner to do that. But I know Dr. McCall had hosted a town hall in the past and a roundtable as well. So just an open meeting format for people to really talk, or at least have their questions heard, in addition to the public forum we're having read out in the beginning of the meetings. So another idea was, well, perhaps, you know, right now we're a community task force of medical personnel, but we don't have any school committee members on the meeting. So would it be beneficial to have somebody from the inside with us? So these are just some potential solutions that I'm put out here in terms of how do we work together moving forward surrounding the communication aspect. So I'm gonna really fast because I know there's a lot of things on the agenda. So
your phone must be well used in the last month or so. So thank you for making all those calls. I really appreciate it. Do any committee members have very specific questions for Natalie and her task force? Member Gustafson?
This is somewhat for Natalie and somewhat probably for administration, so it can be deferred, but it's related. When I read the report and I read the update and I read all the things you're doing, I was very impressed. But the last section that you just talked about general communication and a link with the general reopening task force, really made me wonder, has that task force actually met? Because I think a lot of that falls into groups that have already exist, which we talked about in the past. It's not Natalie's fault. It's a question for administration that we discussed at our last couple of meetings. And I, to my knowledge, haven't seen any update on that. So I guess I'm curious for administration, have they met? Because that would address a lot of the questions in that last section, I think. And that's why the broader task force existed and was supposed to have met again. So I guess I'd just throw that out there as a related question / comment.
Thank you. And I'll take your question / comment, but I do really want to keep this section directed directly towards Natalie's task force, other than that. So Director Keenan, has the reopening task force met?
We haven't met since our meeting in November, and just to reiterate what I've said.
Oh, you muted yourself by accident, Brendan.
Sorry, space bar. At the November meeting, I believe I'd said, as we are looking for community feedback on certain areas, we are going to redeploy the task force. It won't be as frequent as has occurred in the past. Right now, we are not looking for feedback on aspects of the reopening plan. I'm sure we'll get into that probably in Daryl's opening comments. But we already have 2 members of Natalie's group that are on that list to be invited to the next meeting.
Thank you. And again, just questions for Natalie right now, committee members. Member Haber?
Mine does go back a bit to the other group, but basically I wanted to say that I don't think that communication aspect should be part of Natalie's group. I love that she wants to take on so much, but I really feel like it's more appropriate place to put it in the other group. We do have all of the constituent groups incorporated in there, and I think that if there was a monthly update from them rather than her group, which seems more medical focused, I think it would be appropriate.
Thank you. Any other questions for Natalie? All right. Thank you for the
Thank you
update.
so
I
much.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
All right. Stay safe out there. Did you get your vaccine?
I got it today.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight and taking the time as well. Next on our agenda this evening is the student reps report. I know, Kate, you have a presentation. Do you and Kenichi have anything to share in addition to that?
Kenichi, do you have anything?
I don't.
I don't either. In my talk with administration, they didn't really have any updates. What they did say was that sports have started, our clubs are still happening. So those are some of the ways we're trying to boost our students' social emotional health. And so,
Right. Are you comfortable sharing from your screen your PowerPoint?
yeah, I can totally do that.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, can you see my screen?
Looks good to
Sorry.
me.
All right. Present.
Awesome.
All right. So basically, this is just the survey that we presented to our middle and high school students. And it's based off MCAS and COVID learning. And it came from the DESE State Student Advisory Council. So the survey has been updated since management, just because we all had to use the same platform for DESE, and they had to teach me how to use Canva and do all sorts of fun new things. So it has been updated. It also has updated numbers at management. I did not have two of the middle schools hadn't sent out the survey yet, but they have since contacted me, and I do have representation from the 5 middle schools and then the high school. So that was great. And so thank you to Dr. McCall and Tara Weeks for reaching out to them. So basically, this survey came from the State Student Advisory Council, which has high school representation from every city and town in Massachusetts. And so each school gets to send a representative or two, depending on their school size, to the Student Advisory Council. And within the council, students look at different issues affecting students, and they try to address them in different ways, whether it's through legislation, surveys, things like that. We actually have one student that's a full voting member of the board, and that's a specific to Massachusetts thing. That's only a Massachusetts thing. No other state has that as of 2020. So that's a very exciting thing. Right now, the executive board is currently looking at MCAS and COVID learning. So this survey was sent out to everyone in all the schools in the state to try to get as many responses as possible. I know Wachusett had 883 responses, and statewide we had more than 4,000, and it's just under 5,000 right now, I believe. This is just for legal, I don't want to say legal purposes, but the survey was sent out by the Student Advisory Council, not DESE, but the results were sent to DESE and will be reviewed by DESE at an upcoming meeting. So that's that. This chart just sort of overviews what grades students were in that took it. We had a really low percent of 12th graders take this. We did present it as an MCAS survey, so that might be why some of that response bias is there, because it wasn't sent out as it was sent out as a remote learning and MCAS survey, and as a 12th grader, I might not have taken it if I saw it was an MCAS survey, as I've already completed the graduation requirement. We had a large amount of 11th graders who probably didn't want to take MCAS so much because they do have to make it up from last year. So everything else is pretty even. There was a lower amount of 8th graders, but it's still pretty even there. So that's just the grade makeup. So this section of the survey just covers remote learning. So the question that we asked was, how has remote learning impacted your school performance? 1 was negatively impacted and 5 was positively impacted. And we only saw about 12% of students that said that they were negatively impacted. We saw a lot of students in that 2 to 3 range that maybe weren't positively impacted, but they didn't want to say they were horribly impacted. But I think a 2 is still pretty concerning. But we did have 6.3% of students say that it positively impacted them. And so that was sort of lightheartening to see that we did have students that were really benefiting from this remote learning process. So we asked the question, how has remote learning impacted you, and why you said you were negatively impacted or positively impacted. So for negatively impacted, students could answer more than one. So we gave them specific prompts and then another option. So we gave them a prompt that said difficulty interacting with students, not having the ability to confer with other students, and then social isolation. And they all had about the same number of responses of 300 students saying that they were really struggling with each of those different things. And so you can see the exact numbers here: 335, 355, and 349. And so most of those students answered more than one of those. And then for other options, we had students say that they were less focused at home, they lacked most motivation, and stress levels were high. And so those were some of the major reasons students opted for the other option. Of the students that said positively impacted, we had a large number of students saying they liked being able to learn at home, and they liked the pacing of the course. We also had nearly 100 students say that being the only student in the physical environment was really helpful. And on this one, I believe students were only able to pick more than one, but I might be wrong about that one. And we didn't give another option for the positively impacted. So then we had 40% of students report that, so this goes back to the last slide actually, that they were having difficulty either interacting with students, not having the ability to confer with other students, or social isolation. So this was just to point out that 40% of the students that responded reported one of those, and 40% is a ballpark estimate because, as you can see, all of those numbers were pretty close in the last slide, around 350. So that was the calculation for each one of those. Just like a rounded estimate, I guess. So this question asks, how comfortable do you feel reaching out to your teachers for help? And so 1 represents not comfortable and 5 was very comfortable. We had a large number of students say 5 here, which was really good, and a really large number say 4. So that was really, really good to see. And only 5.7 said 1. And so there's a explanation slide coming up about why students might have said 1. So it was really good to see that a lot of our students are really benefiting from being able to reach out to teachers and compare. And this question was compared to in-person learning. So they were feeling that reaching out to teachers was going very well. So this question was just to follow up on the last one and ask how reaching out has been effective. And so we gave a yes option, it depends on the teacher option, a no option, and that students hadn't reached out. Majority of our students had reached out, as you can see by this. We had a really small number say they hadn't reached out. We had a really large number say it depends on the teacher. And as a student, I can say this is the same thing. Some teachers are just less accessible by email, and you just have to find the way to access them. So definitely working on that is a big thing. And majority of our students said yes. So that was really good to see that we had over 300 students say that reaching out to teachers had been effective. So this next question asks how students felt that their performance had, or asked if your performance had been negatively impacted, which course had been most affected. And we had a lot of students say math and English, or math and science. English electives, history, and unaffected were all about the same. It was really good to see that a lot of students felt unaffected. So over 200 students felt that one of their courses wasn't impacted more than the other, or that their performance wasn't affected by remote learning. But this, again, these science and math numbers are pretty high in the 300s. So this question talked about would students return to in-person learning in a hypothetical world where COVID no longer presented obstacles. And so this was sort of to gauge in a different way how much students liked remote learning. And so this was a really interesting question to me to look at because we had 6.2% of people, say that even in this hypothetical world where COVID no longer existed, they wouldn't return to school. And so I think that speaks to the fact that some of our students are really benefiting from remote learning. and that they like the remote learning style. So that was a really interesting result for me. And then 17 said maybe. So I guess I'm unclear about what the maybe means, but I think that some students being not wanting to return to school in that setting was an interesting thing to ask. I also noticed that a high number of those students were seniors. Not all of them, but I think it was something like 1% of them were seniors. And we had a low number of seniors take the quiz or the survey. So seeing that like 1% of them were seniors was just sort of a maybe, since they're seniors and they're going to college or they're not attending school in the future, that they wouldn't be returning to school in the future. Then these next questions are related to MCAS learning. And so this just covers the questions we asked on MCAS. So this is just an update on MCAS, mainly for the public. I know Dr. McCall included this in his report, but January and February MCAS for juniors has been postponed. For seniors that didn't pass the competency requirement, they've been approved to graduate pending they were complete and pass the required classes. So they can now get their competency determination that way. MCAS, the timing will be shortened for grades 3 to 8, and they're saying it'll be a substantial time difference. So I don't know exactly what timing it's going to be, but that's something that will be making the test at least less stressful for grades 3 to 8. And then biology tests will be offered for 9th graders in June and or February. So we can allow it at those 2 different times. And then this was sort of the accountability requirement that if Wachusett doesn't, or any district underperforms, they'll not be named to the board in the coming year. So those were updates, except for the January, February MCAS for juniors. Most of the rest of those updates had come out before or after students had taken the quiz. So anything from those last 4 bullets, students did not know about when taking the survey. So this test observed how well the students think MCAS represents their abilities as a student. 1 represents not representative and 5 represents highly representative. And obviously there was a very small percentage of students that said that MCAS was highly representative of how they feel they performed in school. We had 31% of students say that it was not representative of their learning, and 24% say that that it was close to not representative of their learning. So these 2 and 3 numbers are really high, as well as that 1%. Obviously, we don't have a high number of students that feel MCAS is very representative of their learning. Next question. This next question asked how you feel your classes during a normal year prepare you to take MCAS. And so we had a large number of students, 37% say they felt prepared and 50% said somewhat. I know I had a few students reach out to me and say they felt more prepared in their better subjects. So whether they're really strong in math or really strong in English, they always felt prepared in one of those subjects. But in the other, they didn't feel so prepared. And so that made them answer somewhat because they were stronger in one subject, but less strong in the other. And that's a normal thing for most of our learners. So that is why that somewhat number is so high for some students. I also think the stress factor was another thing students reached out to me about, was they could only answer somewhat because MCAS was a really big thing for them and it caused them a lot of stress anxiety. So they felt they weren't prepared because they were so stressed about it, but and in reality, they probably did okay on the test. It was just, it brought them stress, and so they didn't feel prepared coming to test day. And then we only had 12.3% say in a normal year that their classes did not prepare them. So that was a pretty good sign. So assuming you stay in the same model right now, this asked if students felt they would feel prepared to perform well on the standardized testing. So this graph is somewhat of the opposite. We had 66% of students say they would not feel that they would be able to perform well on the standardized tests such as MCAS. 25.4% said somewhat. So like the reasons I explained before, that sort of explains some of those somewhat numbers. And then 8.5 said yes. So I think that goes back to the numbers we saw in remote learning of students that said that they felt that they would be prepared and that they enjoy remote learning. And so this just puts those two graphs we just looked at side by side so that you can sort of see how the graphs have changed from the previous year to now. And so it just shows that the no used to be at 12.3 and now we have 66% of students saying that they would not feel comfortable taking the test. So it just sort of shows that students this year are feeling a lot less prepared to take the MCAS than we usually would be. And so this is just, we asked if students believe that MCAS should be postponed on the grounds of COVID disruption, and we had 86% of students at Wachusett that were surveyed say that they felt that this MCAS should be postponed for the year. And then we had 89% of students believe that if we were to postpone MCAS, that students should not be required to make it up as their part of their graduation requirement. And so I think this is somewhat where the competency determination comes in, which will help with those seniors. But the thing is those juniors that will have to take MCAS this year. And so some of those students, just to make them feel comfortable and make sure that they to look into that graduation aspect for them. So these are sort of the takeaways. I know Chair Weeks asked for some of the things that we should be looking at next. And so these are sort of some of the Student Advisory Council's recommendations. I did ask a few other students their thoughts on the data in the Wachusett district so that we could see not only some outside perspective, some inside perspective, and then obviously some of my opinions are in here too about ways I think that the Wachusett district could better prepare students. So these parenthesis numbers are just the slide they are on. So if you'd like to go back, you can look at it. But so it asks, so one of our recommendations was to look into students concerned about taking the MCAS. And so that was that survey where students had a higher % chance of taking or saying that they would not feel prepared to take the MCAS this year. The other thing is I know we had a resolution on the agenda, I think it was last meeting, it might have been 2 meetings ago, about MCAS. And it did come out of the Mass Association of School Committees that had already passed the resolution. But to just look into passing a resolution based off these survey results and recommendations in the future on MCAS. Next, to evaluate student and teachers' mental health when reaching out to students, I heard several concerns about students feeling social emotional effects, social isolation, things like that. And so not only looking into teachers, but teachers' mental health is proportional to student mental health on almost every occasion. So looking into, I think I said not only teachers, but not only students, but teachers and their mental health. So looking into both of those parties. And then investigating the effects of remote learning on math and science. Obviously, those are our two subjects that students felt least prepared to take, least prepared in, and felt that those were having negative effects on their remote learning time, and that they felt that those were the most affected subjects. So looking into ways we can best equip those teachers to be effective and work with our students to make sure that those classes are meeting requirements. I know we just got iPads for our math teachers, so that can definitely help with some of that math teaching, but just making sure we're keeping an eye on those two subjects in the future to make sure students feel prepared. On this next slide, we have a few more. So exploring how students could be affected by the pandemic in remote learning. I know this is something that's brought up several times, but just look at school engagement and SEL and current effects taking place, just so we can gauge our students' social emotional learning and providing tools and proper instruments for our students to deal with what's happening in the pandemic, and just making sure that their mental health is okay. I know a lot of students said they were negatively affected because of social isolation and things like that. And so we just want to make sure that all of our learners are in a good place mentally. and then come up with a solution to address these issues. That's pretty basic. But we should explore students' concerns about contacting some teachers. We had a high percent of students say that there were some teachers that were really hard to contact. So just working on teacher communication, and obviously most of our teachers have been fantastic, but I know at the upper grade levels, it does get hard when you have multiple teachers and it gets difficult to contact some of the teachers around. So just looking into that and providing those outlets is really important to students. Investigating farther polling of students to investigate how administration can assist them. So whether it be on a school basis, whether it be on a district basis, but just making sure that the district's providing them the best learning we can as a district, and making sure that we can assist all of our students no matter what their circumstances are. And so ways we have this data, but looking into ways that from here, and I know we gave a parent survey, but ways we can best make sure our students are well prepared to be good learners. And then if students do take MCAS, I would recommend that we look very closely at the results compared to previous years. As we saw in that one question, that students felt less prepared to take it this year, we should look really closely into how those students do in the coming year, and just sort of compare those results to make sure that, and to see the effect on pandemic learning and the remote learning and everything that's happened this year. So this is sort of what the Student Advisory Council is saying that we would recommend to the state as sort of our next steps. And so you can read it in its more elegant state, but we think that MCAS would disadvantage students. I know we've come a little bit farther on this in the past few weeks, saying that we think maybe students should take MCAS but be held harmless for MCAS, because we think that we could be able to compare the results to previous years. But we also think we definitely agreed with lowering the time statement on MCAS, but making sure that students feel less stressed about taking the MCAS this year, and just making sure it's a comparative assessment, and not making it so that the students feel the stress around the standardized test that most students feel. And then just making sure that everyone has access to educational resources, and making sure that the MCAS is fair, which it won't be this year. And so that's why we think giving a kid a diploma based off MCAS results, specifically with juniors right now, would be unfair. And then ideally the test should be canceled, but the state has already started administering MCAS, or administering it. So we've already started distributing the exams to states, or to schools across the state. So we acknowledge that, and that's sort of where the state advisory council is. And then this is just the thank you slide. Thank you, Chair Weeks, for reaching out to all the districts. Thank you for letting me present to you. That's all I have.
I feel like you need to take over, and I can just go take a nap for the rest of the meeting. This is fantastic. Thank you so much, Kate. And I do want to make sure the committee is well aware. If you go to her first slide, the students of the Wachusett district made up almost 1/5 of the total responses in the state. So this is a testament to Kate and her leadership. Obviously, we are a large district. We are not as large as other districts in the state, and clearly not as large as the other districts combined. So this survey gathered strong data because of Kate and her leadership, and that reason alone. So it is something, Kate, if you emailed that to, I want to make sure everybody has it. I think it's in their email, but that data is just fantastic to have. Do any committee members have questions for Kate? Oh, you're getting a lot. You ready? All right, Member Haber.
Thanks a lot, Kate. I appreciate the work that you've done, and the presentation and your analysis of the data. I do have a little concern that our sample might be skewed. I would think that the kids who are doing poorly, who are not engaged, are not the ones who are filling out this survey. And so, as much as I appreciate the percentages more than the numbers themselves, I worry that it's skewed a little bit. But thank you very much.
As most surveys are. Anyone that fills out a Yelp review either had the best dinner of their life or the worst service they've ever had. They didn't just have an okay experience. But Member Dennis, I believe, is next.
Thank you. So, wanted to pass along a thank you to Kate and Kimchi. But I thought this was excellent work. What I was particularly appreciative of was the insights that you brought forward and the recommendations. It's something that we don't always get in a lot of the surveys and studies that we see, and it's what makes the survey impactful and sets direction going forward. And I do hope that the administration takes a very close look at those insights and recommendations and folds it into what we're doing going forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Dennis. I think we have Member Ember next.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for all your time and your thought and terrific presentation, terrific analysis. So thanks. It's just great.
And then I think we had Member Campos as well.
Thank you, Kate, for the presentation. I can remember my frustration with MCAS not that many years ago. And question for the chair, will we get a copy of this? If we have, unless we have already, I haven't seen it.
Yep, we'll make sure you guys got it.
Yeah, you
Thank
haven't gotten it yet, but I know Mrs. Peterson just requested it, so I'll make sure I send that to her and she gets it out to all of you.
Thank you.
Awesome, guys. Thank you again, Kate and Kenichi, and keep up the efforts. MCAS is not the only issue. It's a major issue. It's not the only issue bothering students. So with your time with the SAC and the state, I hope you guys continue these efforts throughout the school year. Next on our agenda tonight is the superintendent's report. So Dr. McCall, you've got a big PowerPoint to live up to, so I hope yours is good tonight as well.
Well, Kate's been working on that for a little while, right, Kate? But you know what I have to say, we had the opportunity to see that in management, and she did a great job presenting it. And I know she had reviewed it with Principal Biendo probably, over a month ago now, because I think some of the the data has been around for a while. But I can tell you, we've been, we had a superintendent had a meeting with the Commissioner of Education on Thursday afternoon, and we spoke about some of the issues associated with MCAS. He is really looking at it this year as a way of just kind of gauging growth, not trying to compare kids to kids or schools to schools. And he was very careful about saying that. He did say that he's pretty close with Miguel Cardona, who's going to probably be the new head of the education department at the federal level once Joe Biden takes over as president. So he did say that Mr. Cardona is a supporter of assessments like this and has been a strong supporter in Connecticut. So he doesn't really see it going away anytime too soon. And again, that's one of the reasons why it's very challenging to modify anything like this, because it's tied back to federal funding. That's how the whole thing kind of works. So again, I think if certain people at the state level had their druthers, they would probably say, yep, let's just eliminate it again, let's wait. But the only reason that was able to happen was because they were able to really solicit feedback from the federal government last year, which is why we didn't have to have the MCAS take place last year. So, Kate, thank you. Nice job with that, and great information. So thank you, Chair Weeks. What I'm going to do right now is kind of go through an update on the transition that we are currently going through. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do a quick presentation. It's our third slideshow tonight. So
with 3 very different topics, so it's great, and we appreciate having that data.
Okay. Are we all set?
Looks good from my end.
Excellent. Okay. So again, sorry, I'm just going back. So transition hybrid planning. This is our update in terms of where we're at. And what I wanted to do is just go through a few items with you associated with, starting off where we are with our buildings right now and our PPE. So In terms of some of the actions that we've taken recently, we have 2 sprayers in each school, 2 disinfectant sprayers that we use for deep cleaning of classrooms now. We've been doing that more consistently, and that's something that will happen on Wednesday afternoons in all the schools as the kids come back in. This is something we've talked about. We also have airflow meters, and which actually measure the airflow rate, and then carbon dioxide level meters that we are going to be sending out to all the schools. So we have about half the schools already trained. We will have hopefully the rest of them trained by the end of this week so that they're ready to do spot checks on not only airflow rates, but also CO2 levels in the classrooms once students are really back in. We just had another arrival of personal protective equipment, PPE, that was sent out to all the schools. So we have about 2 to 4 months worth of in-person teaching PPE for students and staff. So again, what we're going to do is take a look to see where we're at in a few weeks, and continually assess kind of our stockpile and then move forward. In terms of transportation, we have our regular yellow bus routes. We have our specialized transportation van routes and our cohort bus routes. They've all been finalized. We're going to notify parents of bus pickup and drop-off times at the latest by Wednesday. Hopefully, we'll be doing that tomorrow. In terms of instruction, so one of the things that we've done is that we've met with every single principal in the district, and we've talked about the logistics associated with bringing kids back into the building, staffing, the resources they might need, especially around technology, and then also the professional learning, PD. So, I can tell you that we had an online PD course that we purchased for all of the teachers in the district on blended learning, and that's available for all teachers. And as of early last week, about 150 had taken it thus far, and that was, I think, by Monday or Tuesday of last week. And that was January 4th. All teachers came back to the school buildings, and they spent the day setting up their classrooms. And what's great is that teachers are working from their classrooms now, and the instruction's happening from that space. In terms of health and safety metrics, this just some of the updated information around our COVID cases per week. So here are some of the numbers that have been shared with me by UMass Medical, and we can see there's a steady uptick in terms of the overall numbers throughout the 5 towns. Right here, we have cumulative COVID cases on the left-hand side, and then we have a 3-week average number of new cases, and it's broken down by town. So, some of the towns are moving a little faster than others, and Holden in particular is. Whereas we also have towns such as Princeton, and the numbers started to drop a little bit more by the time the end of December rolled around. This is a COVID stat by age group. The state just put together a COVID dashboard, and I believe I shared it with school committee and also through my newsletter with the community. And it actually has a great deal of information that's helpful, and it's updated very regularly. So this basically breaks down age groups of people who are actually getting the cases. So these are cases in the past 2 weeks, and it's 0 to 20, 20 to 30, all the way up to 80 plus. So you can see the 0 to 20 range, about 10,600 students actually, or students 0 to 20 year old kids, teenagers ended up having this, having COVID. And if you go to this side, the 0 to 20, these are hospitalizations. So out of all of those students, there were 4 hospitalizations associated with 0 to 20-year-old students and kids versus the larger number over here of 80 plus, 70, 80, 60 to 70. So there's an interesting kind of curve that goes along with this as you look at this. This is the matrix that we had talked about at our last school committee meeting before the December break. I know it's a little hard to see. I apologize for that, but it's we took a snapshot of it and we put it on here. And we have our 4 risk levels across the board. And we also have our domains, which include available staff resources, PPE, state and regional healthcare resources, presence of multiple cases in districts, and then community positivity rate. This is a current status. So what we've done is that we've kind of updated, where we're at right now. So available staff resources, we're about at 2 right now. We do have staff who are out and due to isolation and quarantine. And it's, in terms of the overall percentage, it's probably a little less than 4%, but it's a number that we're looking at and we're watching very carefully. We have, as I mentioned earlier, more than adequate supply of PPE for right now. When we're looking at state and regional healthcare resources, the hospitals are, reaching a certain surge capacity. They're not there yet. I know Central Massachusetts, when we met with the boards of health, Central Mass in particular, is still doing okay. And I think that's due to the fact that they opened up the field hospital at the DCU center to handle some of the surge. Multiple cases in district schools. You can, that's a 2 as well. So when we're looking at this, we know that there are some places where we have had more than 1 confirmed case, but very few over the past few weeks. Community positivity rate, that is a 4. We're above 5% across the board in all of our towns. And if you break this down without any weighting, basically comes out to be, a response level of a 2 or hybrid learning in place. If you just use this as your use these as your determining factors. So today I had the opportunity to meet with our boards of health. And these are the current cases in each town. So they're still high. Holden, over the past 2 weeks, it's had 228 cases, Paxton 63, Princeton 21, Rutland 53, and Sterling 37. The positivity rates range from approximately 6.5 in Rutland all the way to 12.8 in Paxton. There were concerns around the rates and the increases of these during the second spike from BOH members. There was also some concern around, really weighing the balance between health and safety and ultimately being able to provide the best educational environment and opportunities for kids. And I think in Catherine's presentation, it's very clear and it's easy to see because the students are the ones who are putting that information out there. Mental health, social emotional learning, connection to one another, and so not only to the peers but also to the adults in the schools. That's an important part of what's missing right now as we remain in remote learning. So and the other part that they brought up was we don't know how the transition to hybrid will affect community numbers until we try it, until students are back in school and we move through this process. And then a really important part was, when we do bring students back in, and this is for students and teachers, we want to ensure that they do not come into school if they are sick. Again, that's something that we always want to make sure that doesn't happen. And I know, in before times, if you call it that way, if a student maybe had a runny nose, you'd be like, oh, don't worry about it, you're okay. But, we're going to have to be much more cautious and careful moving forward. One thing that has been brought to the attention of all districts, and this happened last Friday, was the state's offering up the opportunity for pooled testing. And I just basically took the information that was shared with us in reference to what pooled testing is. And it's really taking several samples in a pool, and then you test that pool sample with a PCR test for COVID. And this allows you to really test more individuals using the same amount of resources as a PCR test. So it's when they talk about an overall cost, it's about, you can get basically 10 people tested for the price of 1, if you look at it that way. So people would be tested about once a week. Results are delivered within 24 to 48 hours. Again, if it's negative, all the individuals in the pool are all set. They're presumed negative. They stay in school. If the result is positive, then the individuals in the pool must quarantine, and then they're retested individually. And the Abbott Binex Now Rapid Point of Care Antigen Test would be the test that's used for the follow-up testing. And it's a 6-week launch. So they want to start this fairly soon. And during that 6-week period, districts and schools get test kits, support from a testing service provider, software to track results, and it's all for free for the first 6 weeks. After the first 6 weeks, we can continue to do this as a district, but we have to purchase the tests, software, support from the contractors and so forth. And we can do so using the stimulus money that will be coming into the district probably within the next couple of weeks. What's exciting about this is this really puts us in a very different position in terms of ensuring that we have kind of a safe environment for the students and staff as we bring kids back into the building. I'm not sure what the exact time frame is for this right now. This was put out on Friday. I sent in our information on Friday for the district to say that we are interested in doing this. So what we'll do is we'll wait to hear back. I think everything has to be filled out by the end of this week. They'll process it, and I think they're ready to go. So we're in a positive place in terms of how that will work. And ultimately, when we're thinking about what we're going to do with our moving forward as a district, and I think Chair Weeks talked about this a little earlier. When we met with the boards of health, I can tell you that they felt as though yes, numbers were going up, but in terms of how this could play out, there was no definitive yes, open up, or no, don't open up. It was and not necessarily non-committal, but I think they understand that there is a great amount of concern around students not being in school. That the mental health associated with students at home, the ability of students to access the curriculum, the ability of students to have access to technology is something that I think is has to be taken into consideration when we're looking at this. They also see the numbers going up around us, but we have school districts to the west of us, to the east of us, who are open right now. They have students in their buildings. They have staff in their buildings. They're ready to go. Our staff came back in last week. We were so excited to have them. It's great to have them in the schools. It's great to have them, working from the schools. I think getting everyone back in, it kind of eases the tension around being in school because, again, being out, being home, teaching from home, and so forth. I think there's a very different level of kind of it's a different experience. So once you're in your classroom, I know as a classroom teacher, that's really where you want to be. You want to have access to all your materials. You want to feel as though you're ready to roll. And looking at having students back in the building, by doing that, they'll be ready because they're used to their learning space. So, with that being said, I know Chair Weeks and I talked about this a little bit. There's nothing that is kind of impeding us from opening up at this stage of the game. We're looking good in terms of our building readiness, and here's one of the things we did talk about, and with the boards of health, there's no guarantee schools will stay open. There's no guarantee we can keep a school open for an extended amount of time. We will have to take a look at how everything plays out with staffing, and it's really staffing that I'm most concerned about in terms of how that plays out. I know Chair Weeks was in a situation where her school was open for, I think, a couple of days, and they actually had to close again because they had a number of staff and students come down with COVID and were close contacts. So putting that into the context of opening schools, I think we can do that. How that then plays out is how well we're able to kind of move through this process. So I'm, wanted to put this out to everyone, and I feel as though we're in a position where we're ready to go.
Thank you for that presentation, and I assume there are many questions tonight, so to keep things orderly, we're going to go through alphabetically tonight. So again, if you guys could write down your comments or have them concise and ready to go when we get to you, we'll give you your 2 minutes, have the administration respond, and again, if you have further questions or follow-throughs after everybody's had a chance to speak, of course, we'll circle back to you. All right, so we'll start. Do my random start tonight to get things really, really spicy tonight. Bob Imber, do you want to start us off tonight?
No, I'm tentatively glad we're going back. The only thing I would urge, Daryl, is if there's a way to contact the state departments that have to do those pool testing sites and say, look, we've been very hesitant for many, many months, and we're finally willing to take a step to go, but we'd really like those resources, and we'd like to be first in line. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but if that could be communicated, that'd be useful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, and Bob, that can definitely be something that I can do an extra follow-up with. But I do know that I don't believe it's a first come, first serve. I believe they have enough to really go around. So I think that's, we're excited about that opportunity.
Thank you, Member Imber. Member Kirschenbaum.
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Dr. McCall, for the presentation. I am comfortable at this point with everything that you've presented today, as well as my understanding of technology acquisitions that we've been getting for our middle school. I like what I'm hearing, and I am excited about getting our kids back to school on the 19th. Thank you.
Member Lavoie.
I've just got a point to make. I think Member Imber had talked about the pool testing, and the research that I've done, it looks like DESE or the state is going to prioritize districts that have already been back to school in terms of prioritization for pool testing. So I just wanted to hear from the superintendent in terms of elaborating our availability for that, so we're not expecting something that potentially we're down on the list on the line for.
Sure, Matt, that's a great question. And so when I filled out the survey information on Friday, it was based upon the moving forward from the 19th on. So I put down on the 19th that we were in person with so that's how you move forward with it. So it shows that we would be going in person. So that puts us up on the list, higher on the list, so that it's not showing us as remote.
So does that imply, just to follow up on the 19th, that everyone's going to be back, or are we phasing things on the 19th? I just like a little more clarity for the community that's paying attention to this meeting so they can properly plan.
Sure. So the clarity is when the school committee voted to not have students back in school any earlier than January 19th. Our plan right now is to have all students back on January 19th.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Member Lavoie. Member Long-Balil.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the superintendent for a very good presentation, and I appreciate very much the fact that you've been so carefully planning to go back to school. I'm a little confused by your answer to Member Lavoie's question. You said we're going to have all students back in school on the 19th. I'm assuming, though, that we're going in hybrid, as we've planned in the past. And I do want to follow up on the point he made about whether it's going to be a phased-in approach. I think when we had talked about going back in November, it was a phased-in approach with 1 day a week for the first week or two, and then 2 days a week thereafter. But where are we on that now?
It's a great question, Linda. So, when we're talking about that, I'm not talking about bringing all kids back in on Tuesday. So it's still going to be based on cohorts. They're going to be broken down like that. We're not going to stagger them coming in at this stage of the game. We don't want to wait any longer. So we want to bring them in, roll it out, and have the students and the staff have the opportunity to get to know one another in person versus just hybrid. And again, our high needs teachers have been in the buildings for several months now, and they've been working with our students, and they've done a fantastic job. And kudos out to all of them, because when I see what they're doing over at the Early Childhood Center and in our developmental programs and so forth throughout the district, our district-wide programs, is phenomenal, and they've been doing it. So I think it's something, as we kind of go through, we've had the opportunity to kind of practice this, see how it plays out, do our contact tracing and so forth via these types of situations at a smaller level than when we're bringing everyone back. So I feel as though we're in a much better place than we would have been if we just brought everyone back in all at once without having any kind of preparation beforehand.
Okay, thank you. I would just suggest circulating a schedule to everybody as soon as possible. You probably already are working on that. But
Oh, yes.
thank you.
Thank you, Member Longbelial. Member Mills, please.
Yeah, so thank you for that. Just an observation, a couple quick questions. One, I do have some concerns with the pool testing. It's going to create an outrageous number of false positives, because we're going to get 20 people positive in all their contacts, and I worry about that circumstance, especially if the follow-up testing is slow, that we're doing this is going to get us out of school in very short order. The two quick questions. One, a request for information. I still feel like I'm lingering on hearing about the learning plans in terms of what the remote part of learning will look like for kids who are fully remote and for the kids who are, while they're remote, the hybrid part of it. I feel like we got first general principles from Dr. Mead Montague. I feel like there's been no follow-up on that. So I hope that we would hear more about what remote learning will look like. And I'm very grateful to the state that they set those high requirements for synchronous learning for the remote kids, because otherwise I feel like they'd be getting nothing, because I've heard no plan otherwise from the district. So I'm request that information. And secondly, I'd like a comment, because we've heard from a bunch of teachers about Wednesday, them having to teach in school on Wednesday when the kids are fully remote. So what is the district's thinking on that?
Sure, Ken. So that's something that we're talking about with the teachers right now anyway. I can tell you that in terms of afternoons, they don't have to be in school in the afternoons no matter what, because that's when we're doing the deep cleaning. They're using the spray guns in the classrooms and so forth. So that's where we're at. And then, in terms of the other information, we can get that out to you as well.
Ideally before school starts.
All right.
Or now.
I'll put that in my the formal request. So again, as usual, if you have those requests, guys, it's just easier if you email them to me so I can send them in one bulk mass. It's easier for Rebecca and Daryl to go through them. So just at the end of the meeting tonight, if you have a request for information, send it to me, and then I usually wait about 24 hours in case others come in, and then I send them in bulk. Member Mitchell. It's been with us tonight. Actually, I don't see him. Okay. Member Ottmar.
All right, thank you. So, so Superintendent McCall, hopefully you can, and one of the things you had alluded to was really problems are kind of getting pinched in regards to staffing. And I was wondering if you could at least talk a little bit more about kind of how that part of the process would shake out. Because as an example, I know that one thing that happened last week was there was a cohort, basically a classroom of our high needs students, that ended up having to spend their day sitting in the cafeteria because both their teacher and their paras were under quarantining isolation orders. And so, as we have more people, as we get people in the building, it's going to happen. And is that something that principals can say, hey, I don't have people, we can't do it? Is that your decision? If you could just kind of talk through how that's going to work, because I think that seems like that could be something where you might say, is there an expectation you could say, all right, tomorrow we're going to have to move remote because we don't have people in this school, in this grade, in this, and so I think if you could kind of talk through what the staffing side of it really could look like, I think that would be helpful for folks.
Yeah, that's a good point, Carl. When we're talking about opening a school, having students in the school, having staff in the school, we have to be able to staff them safely. We have to be able to have the kids in there safely, and provide adequate supervision, oversight of all of them. So when we're looking at having students or staff either as close contacts or they're actually COVID positive, in terms of a diagnosis. What we do is we will be looking in the same way that we've done thus far with our programs in our schools that have been running. So, right now we have 11 schools that have students running, and it's been going for, several months. So what we do is that when we have a situation where we don't have staff, where we can't support it, where we can't move forward, we'll have conversations. First, we have our conversations with the boards of health around, determining who was a close contact, around determining who needs to quarantine. All of that comes into play, takes, an hour, hour and a half. And then we make the determination as to, okay, how does this affect the classroom? Okay, how does this affect the grade? How might it affect the school? So when we're looking at the entirety of this situation, we need to be able to make decisions. And Carl, you're right. It might be on the fly, in terms of, okay, we've got to have some other adults cover this class for right now, while we, kind of figure out, because they just got a call that said their spouse is positive and they're definitely a close contact, so they have to leave the building. That's the stuff that we have to be prepared for. But again, a principal is not going to just say, okay, you know what, I'm shutting down the school right now. By the way, I'll tell the superintendent later. It's a joint discussion. We've already had many of these. We've been briefing the principals for the past several months, talking about how this might work, what happens. And most of them have already gone through this situation, at least once, with staff and with students. So in terms of how it plays out, we could be in a situation where it is, a closure for a day, because we, looks like we don't have the staff, and then they get tested, they're all set, they come back, or it wasn't a close contact, so, we're all set. Again, we just have to be careful with making sure that we're providing, really a safe environment for the kids. We don't want to kind of put anyone at risk any more than they are with COVID, versus having too many kids in a space, and not having enough adults to watch them.
Thank you, Member Otmar. That's an important question. Member Pantos.
Can you hear me all right?
Very well, thank you.
All right. Good evening. I have some comments and some questions. I had some questions about the report, such as to start with, but I have some follow-up questions after this. But first of all, I want to mention that we need commitment from the administration and school committee. Parents need to abide by this date. They can't go through another repeat of what happened in November. We're not going back for a week just to pull the plug for some ridiculous reason, to say the least. We need some commitment, and we need to see it actually happen. I don't want to get parents' hopes up, and I don't want a 48-hour notice. So with that being said, what is the minimum notice for parents to move back and forth between hybrid and remote? What's the minimum notice that you're going to give them if it said that school X needs to close? I can't hear you.
Carol, you're on mute.
Sorry. We could be in a situation where it happens the next day, and in the same way that it might happen if we have a snow day. It can be that precarious.
Okay. Regarding CO2 levels in rooms, you mentioned those would be measured using handheld measurement devices. Will that be logged or recorded?
Yes.
Okay. And let's see, what is the process? So, as I'm sure all of us know, most of our employers have a process that's followed if someone has been a close contact, if their spouse tests positive, et cetera, et cetera. So I was wondering, looking for details for the process, one for teachers, if they've been in close contact or something with someone, what's the guidelines or the flow chart for them to follow? And also for students, if, hey mom, I'm not feeling well, what does that require? Do they have to get a negative test before they go back to school? Is it the parent's discretion? How does that work?
So we have a flow chart already that we can share with you in reference to close contacts, Mike, and that's something that Director Keenan put together, and it's actually really kind of clear, kind of lays out exactly what the steps are and the amount of time and so forth, what happens. So we can put that out there for you. In reference to students, yeah, you're right. Kid might have a stuffy nose, not feeling well. If the parent could, because we can't force a student not to come in because they're not tested.
Right.
That's one of the issues. So what we can say is, you know what, you should probably go get tested and then stay home until you come in. And ultimately, that's what we're telling families. If you have your child who's not feeling well, who has a fever, who, you know, whatever it might be, you know, the list of symptoms, if they have those, get tested. Just, you know, you're better to be safe than sorry. Because again, what does happen is as soon as those kids come in and you start looking at the close contact and what has to happen, that's how schools end up having to shut down, because you can have one child that sees a whole bunch of people, and the time frame now is it's within 6 feet for 10 to 15 minutes over 24 hours. That is not a lot of time. It goes by really fast, and it's not 10 minutes in a row. It's 10 minutes cumulative.
Mm-hmm.
Member Pintos, just to keep an eye on time, do you have many more questions or just a few?
Just a closing comment that I'd like to have the administration pay close attention and prioritize closing individual schools, not closing the whole district. Just minimize closure of anything once we're open. Thank you.
I agree, and that's one of the things, you know, when we're looking at this, we'll look at individual classrooms, then schools, you know, as we kind of play this entire thing out. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your questions and comments. Member Shapiro?
My questions were asked, so I'm going to give back my time. Thank you.
Member Shapiro. Member Silva?
Thank you. That was a great presentation. Thank you for that. But I do have one question. In one of the graphs that you had when you said 10,000 deaths of students between ages of 0 to 20, what was the pool of that? Was that Worcester County? Was that Massachusetts? Where did that number come from?
That's Massachusetts. That's the state.
And you know, as we read all the comments this before this meeting started, you know, I do agree with the social and emotional part of the kids returning back to school, but this is where my hesitation comes from. From seeing those numbers, I really ask myself, what is a social and emotional aspect of a child who might be one of those numbers, God forbid, or their teacher becomes one of those numbers, God forbid. So as much as we talk about social and emotional aspect of our kids and needing to go back to school to interact with their teachers and their classmates, I go back to a graph like that, and as everyone knows, I've had a really hard family case with COVID that you know, ended up in the most horrible manner. And I ask myself, can a student and a teacher ask themselves, they can watch a loved one literally suffocating to death? And that really concerns me. That graph, as much as we say it's only 10,000, that's 10,000 too many, in my opinion. The other question I have is, I know the teachers are scheduled to get vaccines. When will they be getting them? And is there any possibility that they can get them before we start the hybrid? And before you comment, my last question is same thing as what Member Mills brought up. I'm really concerned about the remote students. If parents decide to be fully remote, you know, we talked about schedules, but I'm also interested in education equity. Meaning, for example, there's going to be classes that some kids are going to get hands-on, you know, activities, like science classes have experiments. How do we compensate for the remote students and not have some of their education compromised because they chose to be remote?
Thank you, Member Silva. So I think the first question she had, now I'm going to forget it. So
it was the graph. Yep, it was all of Massachusetts. Yep. Thank you.
Right. That was all of Massachusetts. And again, those were confirmed cases.
Yeah, cases, not deaths, Member Silva.
No, not deaths. There were, so I can tell you if you, I didn't put that section because there are actually 3 charts. And
No, that makes me feel slightly better, but it still makes me feel horrible that 10,000 kids were struggling with breathing. So it still concerns me.
Yes, I totally agree. And I can tell you that in that 0 to 20 range, there were no deaths. So that's the other part of it. I just didn't feel like putting deaths up there at this stage of the game. But the second question, Asima?
The question was about vaccines, when they're scheduled to get them, and if we can do it before our own hybrid starts.
So we will not be able to do it prior to students coming back on Tuesday. The majority of the students coming back. I can tell you that our nurses will actually have the opportunity to get. All of our nurses are considered to be first responders right now, so they will get their vaccinations this week. At the same time, in terms of teachers, when we talked about this with the commissioner the other day, we're still looking at a February to probably early April timeline. I would hope that gets moved forward. I think when the new president takes office, supposedly he's talking about just releasing all of all of the vaccines to the states. How it then gets rolled out from the state level is another story. But I think how it's working through UMass and so forth is just it's actually been very, very well received. And I think our community, in fact, Rutland just had a vaccination today at their fire station where they did first responders and so forth. So again, I'd love to be able to do it earlier. We just don't have the opportunity to do that. But when we're also talking about, so going back to the remote, we can't replace the hands-on tactile piece of a lab in person for a remote. What we can do is look to see what programs, what other types of supports we can provide to those students through the remote process. But as Member Mills mentioned, we now have a 35-hour window that they are going to be tied back to in-person learning. So there's going to be much more overlap than what we had originally anticipated when this was put forward. So the state actually did a really good job. I wish they had done this a long time ago. But again, it's, better late than never with that.
Okay, I'd encourage if there's any hands-on training like that, if teachers could do it where, if the remote students could pick up material and do it at home if possible, but, that way, at least amount of disparity in education as possible.
Yes. And just Deputy Berleau just wanted to jump in real quick as well.
Yeah, I think I could answer Asima's question there a little bit. In terms of what are we doing for kids that are remote in terms of science, we've bought into 2 different programs at the high school that allow labs to be automated and kids can access those remotely. In terms of math, we bought the high school math teachers iPads so they can represent mathematical formulas, provide real feedback. We brought them iPens, essentially a smart pen, so that they can write on PDFs and give the kids direct feedback on their work as well, just like they would if the kids were in person. In terms of the elementary and middle school math programs, we bought into the online component of Eureka Math as opposed to all the printed books, so the teachers can get in and provide real-time feedback as well as tests and assessments for the kids and activities. So it has smart PDFs. So we've actually done quite a bit to try to help those tougher subjects that where the online experience traditionally has been very different than the in-person experience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Silva. I saw Member Pantos had a point of information. Remember, this is a question, not actually giving information.
I understand. It was answered, but I was going to point out that it was 10,000 cases, not deaths.
Okay, so that's not a point of information.
Thank you.
You just had a clarification. Member Smith, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I guess looking at the calendar, we're only 4 working days or school days away from our opening. And I may have missed it because we get so many emails from various places, but I haven't seen anything given to parents, me being a parent, or to my children when I've asked them about the expectations for going back to school. So they're not going to read the opening plan. That's not something they're going to do. So we need to give them, and maybe this is planned, but the expectations for properly wearing a mask. We need to tell them that they are expected to wash their hands and sanitize their hands with hand sanitizer if water's unavailable. We need to tell them what it means to physically distance, which is hard for all of us and especially for our children. So we need to give them those things, and I'm sure you're planning that. I'd also like, if you, maybe the principals are planning this already, but just a schematic of the building. What's different when I walk in? Especially, I was anticipating that question would come up that 2 members asked about the phased opening, because originally we had planned to let kids go in and see what it looks like. We haven't done that. So we're not going to do that, you've just said as well. Maybe a video showing them what the building looks like. They haven't been there, as many of our constituents have pointed out, in almost a year. What's changed? What's the same? That's easy to put together. And the stairwells, how do those work in buildings that have stairs? I'm also a little, I continue to be disappointed in the contradictory information that I hear from you, Dr. McCall. I greatly respect you, but this information about, you're telling us in one breath that we don't want to put kids at undue risk, and you're reminding us of the close contact, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then we're close contacts, but yet our policies that we've put in place for the opening allow under 6 feet. So we know we're going to have that close contact issue come up just over and over again. I still don't have, and in your report you wrote that we would get information at this week's meeting, I assume, or sometime during this week, about what classrooms did not make, it says, per the reopening plan from the report, it was agreed that the district would utilize DESE recommendations on classroom spacing, which includes 3 feet minimum. And you also write in here, that we've asked for this information about which classrooms, how many classrooms there are, and you're updating that. And I don't have that unless I missed it in the attachments. And then I'm still curious about the library, because one of my daughters has a class in the library. So because her teacher will be remote. This is at Wachusett. Her teacher will be remote. So what does that look like? She has no idea. So she's going to school in 4 school days. And I keep saying, she says, I don't know. How many kids will be in there? Will there be 90 kids, or will it just be her class? So those kind of questions are not answered, and they're going back. So I'd love to get the information out to parents about those expectations, if you could do that. And also, what classrooms are we sending our kids to that do not meet those 6 feet? Because if my kids have 6 classes like that, I'm not sending them, but I don't know.
Thank you, Member Smith.
Yeah, and yes, that information will go out there. I can tell you, Christina, the high school is the most challenging building out of all of them in terms of those spaces. The classrooms, even the newer classrooms, are pretty small. They're smaller than most of our elementary classrooms throughout, the entire district. So when we've gone through and we've looked at this, one of our issues is that, again, we've been trying our best to even out cohorts. So it's not, 3 and 15. In terms of how it balances out. But there are times when they are a little more skewed, and those are the times when we start to run into those issues associated with, less than 6 feet in terms of the spacing. But that is something that we're getting, and we will put out for everybody. And also the information around, what's it going to look like? How's this going to work? These are all things that principals have been doing for, a long time. So we'll have that out there as well.
Thank you, Dr. McCall. Member Sullivan?
Thank you. Member Otmar, Member Prento, those are some of the questions that I had. Basically, just how, let's hope for the best. But if there are situations, how will they be communicated, and what will the time frames be? And I think you answered most of those questions, and that would just be my big concern. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Member Williamson.
Thank you for that presentation. Going over the matrix, I think, in that level of detail really made it clear for us, but also for the community, about why we feel like we're ready to go into this phase of education for our district. I think, I want to make sure we acknowledge that this is a huge undertaking, going from fully remote to teachers teaching 2 different groups of kids, kids in front of them and kids that are remote, and that there's going to be some growing pains. We've got a talented staff, and they have a vision for what they want it to look like. And I think that we just have to be understanding that there are going to be those growing pains and glitches, as we get up and running. And then I think, once we kind of feel like we've hit a stride with it, I'd love to see us put out another survey to families about how it's going. Now that we've got this new, this new system in place, how is it going? What's going well? Where can we improve? And I think it would be good to do something similar for the teachers as well. What was your vision? What's not working? How can we support you? Whether that's through a survey like that or through the principals, just to kind of take a pulse once we feel like we're in a good place. But, like I said, I appreciate the presentation, and I look forward to us getting rolling.
Thank you, Member Williamson, for bringing up the point around it. Moving from fully remote, and we've been fully remote since September 16th, to fast forward to January 19th, and we're moving into a hybrid model. That's going to be a big jump. It'll be a jump for students. Remember, and I think Christina talked about that. These kids haven't been in. Many of these kids haven't been in school since last March. Some of the students have never been in these schools. We're looking at staff who, as you mentioned, Kelly, are teaching to kids in front of them, monitoring what's going on at home with those students, having small groups, doing whole group. So I think there are going to be a lot of different things that go on. And the one thing we would ask of families and students is just patience right now. It's not going to be perfect right off the bat. It's going to take a little while to get used to. It's going to be, there will definitely be some bumps in the road, but I do think it's well worth the time and the energy to get the kids in at this stage of the game. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your comment. Member Woodland, please.
Hi. So I just want to start with reiterating Member Smith's point about the 6 feet of spacing and at minimum needing to notify the families that they're going to be in such a space. And so I hope that can be personally sent out to the families affected ahead of the 19th for their own good and for the districts. And then also to reiterate Member Mills' call for having an update on the learning plan, just more than the update on the PD available, but really looking at what that's going to look like for the remote days and the remote only students. But my main question is really centered on the testing. So I have a few points that I think the pool testing, if done well, could really alleviate a lot of the problems that I had been seeing in unrolling hybrid. I'm not sure we have enough information for the educational side. That I'm really looking forward to more information. But in terms of the testing, there are a few things that I feel need to happen for it to be worth it. And one of the things that I think you said earlier that I wanted to ask about is the students may participate in this testing. They won't be required to test in order to come in person. And if that's the case, then that kind of defeats the point of having the testing. It looks like the kind of the gold standard of doing this testing is to test 2 to 3 times a week. Maybe once a week is fine. And then also, I'd like to make sure that we know the accuracy rate of the test for the age that they're administered to, because I think that there's differences in accuracy there. And then also, where would the test be administered and who would do the administering for the students? And that, I think, sums up my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Woodland. Those are good questions. And again, I wish I had more information in reference to how this whole thing will get rolled out, because again, the state put this out on Friday. And it was a lot of information that said, hey, more information will be forthcoming, more information will be forthcoming, and so forth. To go back to the May part, students have to have parental permission to do this. So it's not something where we can force students to get tested. Okay, everybody has to have a swab. They have to be allowed to do that. So that's, and that is the part that's a little more challenging. You're exactly right. The gold standard would be 2 to 3 times a week to do this. The way it's broken down right now, what they're willing to do, what they put out there is 6 weeks. Everyone's tested once a week. Unless, you get that negative and then they roll into testing all of them. with the more precise test, let's say. In reference to how that's, all going to roll out in terms of time, who's going to do it. We have to look at that. We're going to look to see, what the third party vendor, who that person is, how that's going to work. Because again, we don't even know. I'm sure they know who it is. I'm sure they already have the contract settled and so forth, but that information wasn't shared with us when it was reviewed with us last week. So again, they just put it out there for us to sign up. So now it's a matter of, okay, let's get the details. So once we have those, we'll put those out there.
Thank you. And just with a quick follow-up, if the testing can be rolled out, it can be rolled out. If it can be accurate, if it can be well used, then I think that's a great asset for our hybrid program. But I would encourage, I know nobody wants to hear about a delay. I know, I understand, I hear everybody loud and clear. But given the community numbers and the community spread, it seems foolhardy to have this tool waiting in the wings and maybe blow past a window of it being viable because we allowed too much spread to happen before it comes out. And that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Member Woodland. Member Young, please. Is Adam not with us tonight? Actually, I don't see him. Member Ayala, please.
Hi. All right. Can you hear me okay? I'm near my, okay. I'm near my pellet stove and it's so noisy. The only way to stay warm. I really liked in the presentation, Dr. McCall, how you said we don't know until we try it, because it's very true with this whole scenario. And Member Pantos, he had mentioned about, can we give parents a few days to know when we're going to shut down schools? And I totally understand why we can't do that, but can we make sure we send very clear, concise emails out to parents and teachers saying that if we do this, if we're going hybrid, prepare to be flexible, because it can be like a snow day. Maybe just put it in those words even, just so, parents aren't cursing us out on social media or whatever, because, they're mad again. My last thing, I'm hoping to meet my 2 minutes. This is one of my big questions I have. I think it's a gray area that isn't looked at possibly. I think the pool testing might help, but I don't, like Member Mills says, it's not 100%. How do we know there's no asymptomatic transmission happening in schools? We don't, right? That's my big gray area that I'm not like, yay, on board, let's go hybrid, because I don't think schools that are in person are giving correct information all the time, because I don't think they know. They're assuming when a parent gets sick, that parent probably got it at work or from the store or from another family or friend. They're not assuming that little Billy had COVID all along and they had no idea. So little Billy was in school with all his friends around. And like you said, if they're in 10 minutes, within 10 minutes, they're breathing each other's air, and little Billy gave it to everybody else. So I'm glad we're doing the pool testing. I think it will help a little bit, but I don't think it's gonna alleviate everything. So I'm still a little skeptical on going hybrid. I really feel for the teachers. I really do. I feel for them, because I worry about that scenario, those asymptomatic people.
Thank you, Member Ayala. And
Thank you.
You are correct. Member Bennett.
Everything that I would say has been said. You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Brown.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is in our district, there's a lot of anxiety. And I think there's a lack of communication, and it's not all the administration's fault, because as you know, we have been in negotiations with the teachers union and everything like that. But I do believe that this anxiety is kind of bubbling up right now, because we are going to be going back the hybrid on Tuesday, and that, you know, we do need a lot of information. Like Member Mills said, you know, we need the buses, we need the kids' schedule. I do know that at the high school, Principal Biendo did let the freshmen come in the other day last week to roam the building because they had anxiety. They've never been to the high school. And so, and I believe it's this communication that we need to really over communicate and you know, send it out saying, hey, the schedules for every kid is going to be out on this Thursday. But we need to have the building principals communicate with the parents and over communicate until the parents are like, okay, we got this. Because I know being on the negotiating team, how much planning the district is doing, it's just not getting out there. The information's not getting out that I see. And so it's all about communication. And, you know, I get a few emails saying, okay, when is the buses gonna be rolling, and when, you know, what's the schedule for the cohorts on we're opening up on a Tuesday, and so that should be cohort A. And so is cohort A only going to meet one day that week? Things like that. So there's all this anxiety out there, and so I think this could all be solved with just communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Brown. I appreciate that. Member Dennis, please.
Thank you. So I'm glad to see that students will be coming back a week from Tuesday for those who want it. And that's the important point for those who want to come back in person. I want to reiterate Ken's request for the details on the how, the details on the learning plan, but in particular, how the minimum level of live teaching that DESE has set forward for those students who are not in the building and are remote are going to be accomplished. You know, I think at our last meeting we talked about the requirement, but we haven't talked about how that's being achieved. And so I think that's an important detail of this plan. I think it's an important detail for people to understand. If I'm remote, what does that look like? If I'm not in school while I'm hybrid, what does that look like? And I'm looking forward to seeing and hearing those details in very short order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Dennis. I appreciate those comments. Member Gustafson, please.
Hold on. All right. I have a couple questions about what we just heard, and I had one question related to something else in the report, and then the others are on the agenda separately, so I'll save those. I love the idea that was mentioned about a video walkthrough of the schools. I know that's a burden for either teachers or principals, but I really think that's one of the most useful things that can be done for our students. Just take a camera from entrance to exit and walk through a typical day. If you have classes upstairs, this is how you get there, lunch, cafeteria, whatever. Jim, I think that's one of the most useful things we can do in the next couple of days for our families. I had a question about the pooled testing. What do you have any sense, or have you thought about what those pools would be? How big will they be, by class, by grade, by school? I know from my reading of all of that, I think that's up to the district and how you want to structure those things. I don't think they put limits on how big the pool would be. So I'd kind of am curious to hear the district's thoughts on that. I think that's important because some of our schools are 200 something students, some are 800 students, some are a couple thousand. So I think that's really important and will help us maximize the cost efficiency when we're helping to pay for it ourselves, to have smaller groups rather than large school size groups. And then my third question was that once we are hybrid, and if we do have to go back to remote, when we do, because I'm sure there'll be times in every school where they have to, will there be consideration in that case for students that get to stay in the buildings? I know right now we have district-wide program students that are in buildings, but I'm also curious if any of those students that are higher needs but are not currently in those district-wide programs will be allowed to stay, if we will prioritize some additional students to be able to stay if we have to switch quickly, because we've talked about that a lot. And I think that's really important for those higher needs students. So those are my comments on what you've said. I had a question about the budget roundtable, but I can save that if time allows.
Okay, so let me go to the last question. Yes,
no problem.
We would keep those students in, as much as we could, because again, our whole goal is to make sure that we're giving them as much in person as possible. Chris Smith, I don't know if you wanted to jump in on that as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, Daryl, that it's all based on what is possible. That when we do that contact tracing, we are impeccably clear about what only closing down what absolutely has to be closed. So that's how we're going to continue to do that.
So we'll do our best to not have to shut up, an
So
entire.
you will try to keep those higher needs students, even if they're not in district-wide programs, if you have to cut the whole district.
Yeah, if we have to, yep. If there's a way, yep.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I appreciate that. I think if that could be reiterated in writing at some point, our families would appreciate having some sense of those priorities, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
And then your other question, Malia, around the pool testing, the numbers.
Yeah.
For some reason, again, I don't have the document right in front of me, but the number 10 sticks out in terms of the conversation that we had, I believe, with the commissioner, where it's basically you take 10 and it's 10, you're doing one, but you're doing 10 people with that
10
one test.
people per group, so that's helpful. I think that's reasonable and helpful.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be you're right. If your pool's too large, then it's not cost efficient.
Do you want my budget roundtable related question quickly?
We're out of time for now. You've exhausted your 2 minutes, but we can go back.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Member Haber, please.
Going last, I got all the big stuff already covered. I do have 2 quick questions. I was really looking forward to seeing the professional development information, and unfortunately, I didn't have a link in my document, or at least I couldn't get it to work. So if that can get forwarded again, that would be great. I have heard from some teachers that we're looking forward to more district-led PD. That's not happening. The second question is a clarification of the COVID dashboard. It was brought to my attention that the cases that we're listing on the COVID dashboard are only cases in which the person came into close contact with someone else. That disturbs me a little bit, and I'd much rather see what's happening in the actual building. Now, obviously, if a teacher's remote, I don't need to know if they have COVID or not. But if we have 10 teachers in a building that have COVID and they happen to not be in close contact with anyone else, that obviously is going to affect staffing and make it so that we have to close a building. So I think that the numbers just don't seem to add up, and I know it's a concern for parents. So I'm curious why it was chosen to be shown this way, and if we can make a change to put both sets of numbers in.
So, Sherry, if you could just kind of go through that again one more time for me. When you're talking about the cases, because again, if you go to the dashboard, and Director Keenan will talk a little bit about this, when you go to the dashboard, you're talking about the positive cases, which is what we have posted thus far, correct?
Correct. The thing that's bothersome to me is that it says the data included below are limited to cases underlined involving confirmed close contact occurring in the buildings.
Okay, and that's, Director Keenan, you can talk about that, because we've had this conversation before.
Sure. Thanks, Sherry. So that has to do with the data that we have access to, direct access to. Off of the dashboard, you'll see linked the DPH data that is tracked by the DPH and the local boards of health. The only complete data that we can really, at this time, point to at the school level and at the district level are cases of potential exposure that have happened within school buildings. We are also tracking, this is important, to quarantine periods for students and for staff. That is, something we're tracking on an ongoing basis. It really has to do with complete data. We don't have, it's all reliant on what people share with us at the school level. So we're keeping as complete data as possible in quarantines, but people don't necessarily have to share that with us. So we're always looking at what we can improve as far as the public-facing data point, but as an initial start, that's why we focused on the ones of exposure.
Thank you guys for the clarification, and thank you, Member Haber, for your comments at this time. I do have Student Rep Kenichi wanting to offer a question, and he hasn't spoken yet. I do have a couple people that want to follow back up. We are very short on time right now, but we'll see how many we can get in.
Thank you. So last meeting, when we talked about the metrics for returning to hybrid, we were at response level 3, which was, I believe, only cohort D was in person, while cohort A, B, and C were all remote. What made the change to response level 2 when we have increased in COVID cases?
Kenichi, I don't know if we actually said we were in number 3 last time around. I think, when we were looking at this, oh, you know what, it could have been, okay, so you know what, the other part of it could have been staffing. So if that's the case, we did have quite a few staff at the last time we kind of looked at this, who were close contacts and so forth. And that's the stuff that doesn't get necessarily logged on the system. So that can throw the entire document off when we're looking at that. So, when we talk about staffing, and I was glad that we've had, Member Ottmeyer actually brought that up. Staffing is going to be probably the #1 issue in terms of what we face in keeping buildings open or closing buildings.
Thank you. And
I'm sorry. I don't believe the numbers have changed though since last time. I'm pretty sure last meeting we said, I need to check this, but we said that even the staffing was at response level 2, with no other changes in the other 4, I believe.
So Kenichi, what I'll do is I'll go through this, I'll take a look at it, and then I'll get back to you on that, okay?
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, great question. So I'm going back through my list to see who has a second question. Member Wilboy, you said it's quick, so I'm going to you first.
All right, it will be quick. Dr. McCall, I know at the beginning of the year when we established the budget, there were a number of positions for adjustment counselors that I don't think were fulfilled. Have we thought about either reopening those positions or perhaps looking at outside providers to provide that necessary support that seems to be critical at this point?
Yeah, great question, Matt. Actually, yeah. So one of the things that I'm doing is I'm working with Director Didi, looking at our budget, what we have available, because we do have money in our salary line. If we can bring those positions online that we had originally talked about. So we have those elementary counselors that were critical in terms of what we were looking at. So yes, that is something. And, if that's not the case and it's not that, in terms of bringing on a true employee, what we could do is have, an outside contractor provide support. Because again, what we're looking at is, how do we infuse more social emotional support for these students especially as they transition back in.
Thank you, Member LeBoy. That was a great question. And then Member Gustafson, brief. You didn't say quick, so.
No, it is quick. I was just referring to the roundtable, budget roundtable. Sorry, it's getting late. Which I watched and was in the report. And at that, I know that our towns requested some more detail regarding the line item budget and what that looks like at this point in the year and for the rest of the year projected. So I was going to reiterate that request because I've made that several times during the year. And I think it would be very helpful as we move through this process and being able to see where we are in comparison to where we thought we would be. Because that document is still online and there's a lot of confusion around that because the March document is what's online right now. So that was my just request that and comment based on that it would be very helpful to have that updated. Thank you.
It was pretty quick. I'll give you a 5 out of 10 for quick. Member Pantos, I'm sorry to miss you. When things start adding up, it's very hard to see past.
Understood. So hearing what other members had to say brought up a few ideas for me. I'd like to echo what Member Gustafson said, which is, and I actually had this written down, walkthrough video of each school I think is pretty simple and shouldn't require too much time on as far as producing it, 1 video per school for students going and entering, exiting the building, whatever their check-in process is. I think that's a great idea. if the 6-foot distance thing is such an issue, if for some reason that's preventing schools from opening, I'd like to consider not having the high school in person if that ends up being a real issue for people. But I think as long as parents are informed that there's going to be less than 6 feet ahead of time, as well as keeping in mind that I'm pretty sure per our last meeting, we were informed that it's less than 6-foot distance on the buses as well. So I'd like to just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Pantos, and thank you to all members for your thoughtful comments and questions. Next on our agenda tonight are recommendations requiring action by the school committee. Oh, all right, Laura.
I'm sorry, mine was at 8:45. My last question is just having to do with clarity on Wednesday. I think Member Mills brought it up that the Wednesday teachers being in school during the spring. I think your answer was that they could be home at that point, but I'm just asking for clarity to allay some anxiety that teachers may have. If they're teaching in the morning and teaching in the afternoon, how are they expected to get home in time to be able to continue their teaching? So this would be a question, a logistics question. I don't expect you to answer it to me. I think that question has to be answered to the teachers so that they can understand what their expectations are. So that's my comment there.
Okay. Yes. They should. They'll know. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I think I have everybody now. So on recommendations requiring action by the school committee, number 1, to support the Student Opportunity Act submission as presented. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Dr. McCall, do you have any clarification on this before we go to a quick discussion?
Sure. I know Member Gustafson had some comments you wanted to make. So what I can tell you about the SOA, this was, again, something that we had started to have discussions on last winter. This actually was pulled together back in November, December, into January. One of the things that happened once COVID rolled around was that everything was put off. So the SOA was postponed. It was postponed. It was postponed. The reason why it was brought back to the table now is that legally, by law, by MGL, all school districts have to have a plan in place. I spoke with DESE last week on this, and they basically said, there's no funding, direct funding for this right now. So there's really no money. They're not sure what it might look like moving forward this coming school year. And they also said, use the plan that you had kind of pulled together last year, submit it. And then what's going to happen is April and May, they're going to reopen the entire process and I think make some modifications to it, maybe based upon where they think funding might be. And, then go through the process. So they basically said, submit what you have, put it together, share it, with your school committee, submit it through the portal. What they're doing is, and I'm not going to call it a rubber stamp, but it's basically a rubber stamp to say that it was submitted. And then what they want to do is come back to it, and school districts will have the opportunity to come back to these and really take a look at them and say, okay, what might we need based upon where we are with COVID, and what's the funding source, and are we going to get money for this? Because I think really that's what it comes down to. I think initially the concept for the SOA is fantastic. It's really around helping support students that need more support around a number of different areas. But at the same time, when we're looking at this, one of the things we have to remember is so much of this is dependent upon funding. And, when we don't have funding, when the state starts to run into areas where they just don't have enough cash to cover everything that they need to cover within their budget, this is where we start to see where the reductions might happen. So this is what was put forth last year. We're carrying it forward, putting it in with the understanding that we can come back to this and make modifications, which was what they had talked about with me last week through DESE.
And I saw Member Gustafson already has her hand raised. Would you like to offer a comment?
Button. Okay.
Mike.
I did because I'm near the end of the alphabet, so I just thought I had something to say on this. I'll try to be quick. I realize that it's not funded right now. I realize there's uncertainty around that, and so it's tempting to just say it doesn't really matter what's in our plan because it doesn't, but it does matter. I think because there was an original request and intent, and who knows, maybe we'll get a windfall of federal funding and they'll decide they can fund SOA theoretically. We don't know. So I think it's important that it's not just that it's taken seriously. And I think what was submitted does not meet the original intent. I went back to the state document that said it should intentionally focus on subgroups not achieving the same level of their peers. It should adapt specific evidence-based programs to close opportunity gaps. It should monitor success in reducing disparities in achievement among subgroups, and it should engage families, particularly from subgroups. This plan is not specific, and it does not meet the needs that we've said has been our subgroup all along, which is primarily students with disabilities in our district. The 4 areas were ELL learners, students with disabilities, low income, and students of color. I took that directly from the guidance document for the short form dated winter 2020. So I don't think that what is submitted is enough detail to meet those requirements, in my personal opinion. And it's not specific enough to address gaps that we might see in students with disabilities. And that was reflected in some of the public comments earlier today as well. So I did want to state that. I've also know this was discussed by CPAC many moons ago, and that was one of the themes. We did not have this level of detail, but that was one of the themes and concerns that came up. So in my role also as talking with them, I did want to mention that I don't think, in my opinion, it meets those goals, even if it's not funded.
Yeah, I should have half an hour ago. What's
Thank
that?
you. That's all I had to say. I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Member Ember, I believe you're next.
So I guess we are going back to school.
Yeah, so Daryl, the thing I wonder is if in what the state sent you in terms of requesting resubmission, they indicated that it could be modified. And if not, can we codify that language when we resubmit by stating subject to modification based upon state funding?
So yeah, you could definitely do that. What they're looking for, and again, you know, when I spoke with, I believe it's Karen Johnston at DESE. When I spoke with her last week, she was really looking at this, saying, you know what, put in what you have. That's no matter what, we're going to be able to come back to it. She's like, and again, what people have to understand is DESE is as stretched as they will ever be stretched. So they do not have the personnel to do what they need to do anywhere. So I think what's going to happen is they probably don't have the personnel to go through these as thoroughly as they probably would have last year at this time, you know, or, you know, last March when all of this was kind of taking place. So what I would suggest is this goes forward. And I understand, you know, Malaya's questions. So Malaya, there are, if you go through the entire process, you can actually go back through. And what I did was I did tie this back to our own, you know, requirements that they said we can do. And, you know, and if you want, I can go through that with you, you know, this week in terms of how this kind of ties back to the entire process. So that's fine. But again, this would qualify. And, you know, as we kind of move forward with this, we still have the opportunity, and this is straight from DESE, to come back and make modifications to this, you know, moving forward.
Well, I guess I would just encourage the district to codify that language and put that caveat in there, just in case state personnel change. And I just think it's in our best interest to put the specific language that gives us wiggle room. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. Member Dennis, please.
Sure. So through the chair to Dr. McCall, can you speak to us or tell us about the public comment feedback mechanism that was used in putting together this most recent request?
Sure. So Tonight was the public comment. We did not have the opportunity to spend enough time kind of going through this entire process. So when I actually talked with them about this, I said, we're going to put the public comment into that first part of the meeting, and she's like, "That's fine. That can go in there." But as I'm saying to you, this is somewhat of a rubber stamp in terms of putting this forward. They're just looking for us to submit right now. How this kind of plays out, because again, I think the other thing that we're looking at is having the opportunity for this to really move forward in a way that allows us to have a true SOA plan that's tied back to funds. That way we know where we're going with this, because right now, this original plan was based upon funds that were set aside that we no longer have access to.
And what is the deadline for this submission?
This Friday.
So I mean, I guess I'll make the obvious comment, right? There's the what's the right way, and then what do we need to do? To me, the right way is that we would have had this in advance. We would have had a proper public comment and session, an opportunity to incorporate that feedback into the submission. Then we would vote on it, and then we would submit it. Given that we're just a few days away from perhaps cutting ourselves off from an opportunity for funding, I think we're not able to follow that path. At least it would appear we might not be. So if we do move forward with this submission, how do we know that we're going to follow the proper process and revise the submission based on feedback as appropriate?
So what they'll do is they'll give us more information around a time frame from which we can move forward with this. So not only associated with whether or not there's a budget that goes along with the SOA, but what protocols and procedures will be put in place for us to make updates to it. In terms of, okay, if there's the requests for public comment, meeting with other subgroups within the community. That way we're able to get that information. There's a time frame associated with it, and we can move forward. So I guess what we'll do is we will get the information from DESE, probably I'm hoping within the next 2 months maybe. I'm guessing around what the next steps are going to be made available for us, and then we will then make those incremental steps put together into a timeline so that we have the proper amount of time associated with getting the public comment, reaching out with families. We actually did share. I had 14 responses because this was shared with all families last year before we closed down for COVID. So we had 14 written responses that were out there. So the public comment today was the live public comment.
All right, thank you, Member Dennis, for your comments and questions. They were very helpful as well. Let me make sure, check the chat one more time. Let's see, Member Gustafson, just one more question from you.
It was really a follow-up because Daryl mentioned me in his response and said he would be clarifying information with me, which I appreciate, but I wish that the full form with that level of information had been provided to us so we could see the explicit connections, because that's what the form requests. I wish that was the case. And I understand the time constraints we're under now. But in March, we also were very close when COVID hit to when this was due, and we did not have we didn't see this level of detail even then. So I don't particularly think that is a valid excuse at this point. I think in March, we should have had that level of detail, and we did not. So that is my comment. Thank you.
So Malaya, you would have had that level of detail if we didn't have COVID, because we were actually shut down at that time. So if that makes sense.
I definitely understand COVID as a factor. Thank you.
Thank you both. Anyone else with questions or comments regarding SOA, please? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Dennis.
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson.
No.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Ember.
Ember, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum, no.
Member Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbelial.
Longbelial, yes.
Member Mills.
No.
Member Otmar.
Otmar, no.
Member Pantos.
Pantos abstain.
Member Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva.
Silva, no.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan.
I abstain.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Member Young. Oh, Adam's not here. The chair abstains. I do believe the motion passes. Madam Secretary, am I correct? 2, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Yes, you are correct, Megan. There are 5 noes, 2 abstentions, 13 yes.
Thank you. All right. With that being said, we're going to move on to the next item of our agenda to award the 2021-2022 heating fuel oil contract to Peterson Oil of Worcester, Massachusetts at a firm fixed price of $169.99 per gallon for 1 year, commencing July 1st, 2021, per the French River Education Center collaborative purchasing bid on November 19th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Director Didi, I'm assuming you're the gentleman in charge of explaining this.
So thank you. Again, we participated in FREC's collaborative procurement. And again, the estimated savings for next year, and again, estimated based upon usage, is that we're looking to pick up approximately $127,000 and change, which as we continue with the 22 budget development, we would look to reinvest that most likely into operations and maintenance.
Thank you for that. The members have Director Didi. Oh, Member Dennis, please. And I think Member Brown, Member Silva, you're not on mute, so there's a little feedback right now.
Sure. Just a quick question to the chair, to Director Didi. Dan, do we have, as part of this this contract, do we offer a guaranteed minimum level of purchase?
Through the chair, yes, 280,000 gallons.
And how does that relate to our previous usage?
So we typically every year use 280,000 gallons of oil, and that's based upon the number of gallons in the tanks, and typically the 2 or 3 deliveries during the year. And if we exceed the 280,000 gallons, then there is a penalty. The penalty is the billing is based upon the market rate at that time, and that would typically be in May or June if necessary.
And if we're below the 280?
I'm sorry, Mike.
And if we're below, if our usage
there is no penalty. No.
Okay. So there is no guaranteed minimum that there is no guaranteed floor that we need to provide. All we're saying is we've locked in our rate for 280,000 gallons. If we exceed that, then we pay market rate.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Director Didi? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote. Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Dennis?
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Ember?
Ember, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbelial?
Longbelial, yes.
Member Mills?
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan?
Sullivan, yes.
Member Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
And the chair votes yes, the motion passes. Next on our agenda tonight is unfinished business. We don't have any unfinished business to go over this evening. Next on our agenda tonight is the secretary's report. So this process, for those watching at home, is a bit complex. When we have executive session minutes, they may only be seen by members of the committee. Typically, this is done in person through the giving of a red folder from Secretary Peterson to each member. Secretary Peterson and I put our heads together about how to make this happen in our now times, our remote times. And so Secretary Peterson mailed via the USPS the executive session minutes to all members for them to review over the past week. When we go over these minutes today, if there are corrections to these minutes, the minutes need to be held because they have to be discussed in executive session. At the same time, when we do approve these minutes, they will also not be released to the public until the matters within the minutes are fully discussed. So even if we pass all of these minutes tonight, they will not appear to the public until the matters being discussed within them are complete. Does that make sense to everybody? And yes, we have to go through one by one in case any of you do have questions regarding the minutes, because those minutes would have to be taken out and discussed in executive session. Member Pantos, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just looking for details on how exactly that works if I have a question or a typo or something.
Yeah, small typos we can correct, but if you have a question regarding the minutes, you need to let me know, and we'll take those aside and discuss them in a upcoming executive session.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right, so we're going to start in our timeline and work our way down. I know this is kind of tedious for you guys, but it's important that these get approved. It's part of our job as a school committee. All right, so first, the approval of the executive session minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District held on August 24th, 2020.
So moved.
Second.
Do we need to hold these for discussion? Member Dennis.
So I've gone through the executive meeting minutes, and I have at least a question or perhaps a suggested amendment on just about everyone.
You do?
Yep.
Is there any you don't?
No.
Okay, so not just about.
Actually, the last one. I think the last one's probably fine.
The last one?
The one dated Monday, December 21st.
Okay, so let's hold all of them. And Secretary Peterson, if we can put an executive session conversation on the 25th to go over all the minutes, except for the 21st, unless someone else has a question on those. So we're going to start with the last minutes. Does anybody have a question or comment on the meeting minutes from December 21st, 2020? So is there a motion to accept the executive session minutes?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. There is no discussion on these, so let's get one off our backs. Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Member Dennis.
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Ember.
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longolia. Linda.
Sorry, Longville abstain.
Member Mill.
Yes.
Member Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos.
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva.
Silva, yes.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan.
Yes.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
And the chair votes yes, the motion passes. Member Ember, do you have a point of order?
I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting till 10:30.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second.
Been made and seconded. The motion is not debatable. Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Member Dennis.
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Imber.
Ember, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum,
Member Lavoy.
Lavoy, no.
Member Longbeliel.
Longbeliel, yes.
Member Mills.
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos.
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva.
Silva, no.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan.
Yes.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
And the chair votes yes. So what I'm asking the committee to do this evening is to take the remainder of those executive session minutes that we are not going over tonight and put them in a safe and secure place in your home. They are only for your eyes, not even for eyes of your family. So please put them away until the 25th. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to get out of executive session minutes. We're going to then move ourselves to letter J on the Secretary's report, approval of the 329 special meeting minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District held on December 21st, 2020. Is there a motion on the floor?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any changes to be made to these minutes? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to a roll call vote. Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Member Dennis.
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Imber.
Yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbeliel.
Sorry, I did it again. Longbeliel, yes.
Member Mills.
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos.
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva.
Silva, yes.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan.
Yes.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
Chair votes yes. The motion passes. I did miss one in there. I thought it was executive session. Letter G, approval of the 1355 regular meeting minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District held on December 7th, 2020.
So moved.
It's been moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there a discussion on the December 7th?
I have a question. Did we just do the 7th or did we do the 9th? I thought we did the 7th.
We did the 9th. I missed it.
I had a correction to the 9th. I thought we were voting on the 7th.
Okay.
So how do you want to handle that? I apologize. I thought I heard someone say the 7th.
The motion's already been passed.
Okay.
Member Dennis.
Yeah, so I distinctly heard you mention, Megan, that we were voting on item J, which is the special meeting minutes for December 21st.
I think you're correct, actually, Mike. I think you're correct.
Okay. So
Secretary Peterson just confirm that and then go back to the 7th. If Secretary Peterson can confirm that, we can go back to the
Yes,
7th.
yes. What you voted on, or what I heard you voted on, was
Okay.
December 21st, the 329th meeting, special meeting.
Thank you.
And
So
that,
I missed.
and that passed unanimously.
All right, I missed G and H. So let's do G and H in order. So then Malay should be all set. So let's do December 7th, 2020. We have the motion and we have a second. Is there discussion on the 7th? Member Gustafson, your question was on the 9th, correct? Okay, great. All right, Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Member Dennis.
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Imber.
Ember, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy,
Lavoy, yes.
Member Long-Balil,
Long yes.
Member Mills,
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar,
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos,
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro,
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva,
Silva, yes.
Member Smith,
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan,
Sullivan, yes.
Member Williamson,
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland,
Woodland, yes.
and the chair votes yes. Next on our agenda tonight, is the approval of the 328 special meeting minutes of the Wachusett Regional School District Committee held on December 9th, 2020. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We moved in second. Member Gustafson, you had a question to these?
I have two. And I'm trying to, I just accidentally closed them on my page. I'll tell you where it is while I try to reopen it. In the last motion that was made before we adjourned, the request to overrule the chair, which I made, it was not, I don't think it quite reflected my intent as stated. My intent was a motion to overrule the chair. The action by the school committee cannot be taken at this meeting on items not included in the posted meeting agenda. It was specific to December 7th. It was not for all time. Because that I think the way it's written makes it seem like it's a rule we're overturning, and I meant it as an interpretation at that particular time and place. So I wanted to clarify that.
With the date, would that satisfy your change?
Yes, I think when I sent this to Rebecca as a question, she suggested that it say to overrule, it's kind of complicated, but she suggested to overrule the chair, that action by the school committee cannot be taken at this meeting on items that are not included on the posted meeting agenda for the December 7th, 2020 special meeting. So it's specific to that date.
I think that is.
So that was my first clarification.
I think that's a worthwhile one. Do you have another?
Okay. The second one was an addition. It wasn't any real change, but it was an addition further up. And again, I can't find the page on the minutes, but it was when we were talking about the motions and the date of reopening. The very last motion, it said members were given the opportunity to make new comments. And I thought there was a piece missing for context that would say, that would reflect that during the discussion, member Imber suggested that he had improved language, and member Gustafson offered to withdraw the motion to allow the opportunity to restate it. The chair clarified that no further amendment would be allowed even if the motion were withdrawn. I think historically that context may be important to explain the outcome. And it also is consistent with other points where it said the chair ended discussion, the chair ended discussion. So I think that was a missing component.
Okay.
I wish to add that.
I think that's also a valid thing to add. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Member Dennis, did you have a clarification yourself?
I did. So on page 27, at the top, it reads, Member Dennis requested training for the school committee on parliamentary, I assume that means procedure, to be scheduled. Member Dennis had another request which Chair Weeks asked to be put in writing. The clarification is that Member Dennis requested that the statement of no confidence from WREA be listed as an agenda item for the next school committee meeting scheduled for January 11th.
Madam Secretary, can we make that addition as well, please?
Will do. Will do.
Writing, so make sure we have Mike as well. And so we did discuss this earlier today. And so what we would do would be to pass these meeting minutes as amended with those 3 changes. Okay. Any other questions or comments on these particular minutes? Okay. Seeing none, Member Ayala?
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett?
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown?
Brown, yes.
Member Dennis?
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson?
Gustafson, yes.
Member Haber?
Haber, yes.
Member Imber?
Member, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum?
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy?
Lavoy, yes.
Member Long-Balil?
Long yes.
Member Mills?
Okay.
Member Otmar?
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos?
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro?
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva?
Silva, yes.
Member Smith?
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan?
Yes.
Member Williamson?
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland?
Woodland, yes.
And Member Young, and myself, I guess. The chair votes yes. Thank you guys for those amendments and those catches. I appreciate it. Next on our agenda tonight are the treasurer's report / financial statements. Please direct those questions to Director Didi. Now, next we have committee reports. So next is management. We have not met since our last meeting with the holidays. We are going to be meeting on the 20th of this month. Ed Sub, Chair Smith.
Okay, thank you. Good evening again. The Education Subcommittee met before this meeting tonight, and we spent our entire meeting discussing the best way that we thought we could go forward in relation to district indicators of success. To briefly summarize, we'll be looking at some already available data from various venues that the district has access to, and we will decide from those measures what we think would be possible good indicators of success for our district. So after looking at those items in conjunction with some possible measures that the administration has shared with us, we will then try to put together, I know we've used the word dashboard a number of times this evening, but put together a dashboard of this information. Our next step will probably be to create a new policy that will then allow this to continue on with a regular review of indicators. So that would be, if we decide to create that policy, that would obviously come to all of you for your approval. And the indicators are meant, from our conversation, we came to the general conclusion that the indicators are meant to not only provide accountability measures for the public, but also promote school quality and district quality and growth. It's super challenging. We've had a number of conversations, but we're committed to trying to figure this out. Our next meeting will be a longer meeting, probably a 2-hour meeting coming up soon. We're just, it's to be determined on the date. And that is it. Thank you.
Any questions for Ed Sub? All right, thank you for your hard work, and I was happy to attend your meeting tonight. Legal Affairs, Chair Brown, please.
Hi. Yeah, so we met on Monday, went right into executive session, went over pretty much where we are in bargaining. And I'll discuss that at probably January 25th meeting. We also, the bargaining team went into second or third mediation last week for 5 hours. And the other 3 units that we're negotiating, Member Ottmer met with the paraprofessionals on January 7th. Member Ember handled the WAA, and we'll be going over that probably in executive session on our 25th meeting. I am meeting with the ABA PAs tomorrow, second meeting. And that is it.
Just that.
That's it. Yeah.
Any questions for legal? All right. Huge thanks to all the work you're putting in, Scott. I know the hours are tremendous. Next on our agenda tonight, Superintendent Goals and Evaluations. Chair Mills, please.
Yeah, so looking forward, on a previous meeting, the superintendent and the committee had agreed together that on the 19th, I believe, we would have our update sent by email to the committee in advance of our meeting on the 25th, so people had time to read the superintendent's mid-year progress report. So I look forward to seeing that, as well as other things happening on Tuesday. And so we should get that by email then, and we'll be asking people to have prepared responses succinctly at the meeting on the 25th, and hopefully the chair will put that on the agenda. And also, just as a reminder, we'd also discussed as a committee having a weekly per report and update on what had been accomplished in each area, which I didn't notice in this report.
That was also a question I had, to make sure that that does get done in the future. Thank you, Chair Mills. Any other questions for Superintendent Goals and Evaluation? Thank you. Somehow we missed Business and Finance. Member Dennis, Chair Dennis, a report from you.
Sure, thank you. So the Business Finance Committee met last on December 21st. We discussed the state of a number of revolving accounts, including cafeteria, transportation, and athletics. We'll be meeting again on January the 19th.
Thank you for that update. Any questions for Business and Finance? Seeing none, we're going to go to Facilities. Chair Young isn't here. Vice Chair Woodland, do you have an update?
Yeah, so we last met on, oh, you know what? The last time we met was before, we have not met since our last meeting of the full committee.
Great. Any questions for Facilities? Right. Madam Secretary, you're off mute and I can hear your furious typing.
Oh, so sorry. So sorry.
Serious typing. You don't mess around. She only has to deal with us one more time, guys. So we're making it too easy on her tonight. Diversity, Chair Silva.
So we went over the bullying prevention and intervention plan. We reviewed the comments that were provided by members of the public on this topic. We also discussed that there was an issue with the investigation process when there was a complaint made and possible consequences to the findings. And we will be sending the bullying prevention, I believe, plan to the school committee. We started reviewing the promoting civil rights and prohibiting harassment, discrimination, and hate crimes. And we are scheduled to meet this Thursday on the 14th.
Thank you very much. Any questions for diversity? Looking forward to joining you guys then. Next on our agenda this evening is audit. Both members aren't here tonight, so we'll skip that over. We have no ad hoc subcommittees, no building committees, and so school council reports. Anybody have an update?
I have one. CPAC is meeting tomorrow for their monthly meeting on the 12th. They're meeting from 6:30 to 8:30 via Zoom. The link is on the website. And special education families, I know, should have received an email invitation as well. The topic is to review results of the CPAC survey that was done, I believe, in November or December. It was done of parents and staff to get their feedback on special education and remote learning in particular. So it'll be a very informative meeting. I was at their officers meeting in December and got a preview, so I encourage people to attend. There's a lot of good information they'll be talking about.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Oh.
I have an update from NAQUAG. We talked about they are working on training for STAR reading assessments for grades 1 and 2. They are continuing to do special ed assessments. Parents are continuing to schedule those. They're also working on some fun things for the kids, including a possible virtual production from the Hanover Theater for grade-specific levels, online book fairs, virtual bingo, and some other fundraising activities too.
That's great. Anybody else?
I have a brief one from Mountview. We met last week. We went over the district's decision on the matrix on the 4 different levels. We went over the quarantine guidelines, and they're starting to look at grade 8 graduation already. And it's kind of sad because they had to do a drive-through last year, which worked out really well, and they want to improve on that. So we don't know. Just interesting how this is a really different year.
It is. I'm glad you guys are thinking about it already. Any other school council reports? Okay. Just to let you guys know, there were a few public comments that came in during our meeting. Not as many as before, so I'm going to read those right now. As I get to the bottom of our spreadsheet. And I would love any public feedback after the meeting via email, of course, if this process was easy for you. Of course, we want to make ourselves as accessible as possible. So we do have a few more tonight. So first from Dana Sandrova from 95 Winthrop Lane in Holden. I have a senior, freshman, and second graders. These kids miss out enough. They need interaction with peers and teachers. I'm concerned with the long-term impact they'll have on younger kids. From Philip Grasowitz of 14 Laurel Lane in Princeton. This is from the 21st, but I'll read it anyway. I'd like to comment on your desire for metrics on which to reopening the schools in the near future as no earlier than January 19th. Where were these metrics in August, in September, in November? Of course, you didn't have them because you didn't need them. The default position of state of Massachusetts, the governor, the Massachusetts DESI, and CDC is that schools should be open for in-person learning, having using the proper safety guidelines. Many other schools at this time around our country have been open, yet our district schools remain closed. Everybody looking at data and science know that children are not a primary source of transmission of the virus, but that seems to carry no weight on the WRSDC. So much for following data and science. I get the feeling that the insistence of metrics at this stage is not meant to open the schools, but instead to keep the schools closed for an unattainable metric and worse, not related to schools. I would like to remind the WRSDC members your responsibility to our school system and our children's education. You're not a board of health. Your only metrics you should be considering how to manage COVID cases that may arise within the school once it's open. It's not your responsibility to keep our schools closed to keep a statewide case count down, especially at the cost of children's education. Speculation and fear should have no place in discussion, and this damage is being done to thousands of children in the district. The damage is not being done by the virus. The damage is self-inflicted, keeping schools closed when the data science and experts say they should be open. And once again ask, after 9 months, what is left to do to keep our schools open? If the answer is nothing, then your fiduciary responsibility is to open the schools and manage them and the virus the same way everyone else is doing it. Another comment from Dana Sardova, 95 Winthrop Lane in Holden. I'd like to know what the district plans to do about the seniors in high school. They're missing out on what should be great times and memories. She'd like to see a plan on how to handle graduation, prom, and other senior activities. From Michaela Becker on 335 Chapel Street in Holden. Remote has been very difficult and has a lot of anxiety. My daughter has been remote and missed so much from going to Mount View to WRHS during this time. Her strong classes from home were okay, but is a struggling class. It's almost impossible. I have a 10th grader at Monty Tech that has successfully been hybrid since September with a much more robust hybrid program. 2 half days, really? My child has lost so much already. There should be more support for kids that are struggling and having anxiety. From Michelle Van Riet on 230 Charmuck Hill Road in Rutland. It's nice that you invited Natalie and his nurses to so quickly present to school committee in an open meeting. Could we also get an update on the status of the initial reopening task force members volunteered to work on over the summer? Has it been disbanded? Why hasn't the original task force been meeting? Next, we hear from Aidan Kearney at 111 Mason Road in Holden. My daughter is a kindergarten student at Davis Hill. She's never stepped foot in her school. She has no friends as her peers are nothing more to her than faces on a computer screen for her. Although she's making the best of it, she desperately wants to go to school. Watching her do gym class by jumping over a piece of paper in her bedroom is painful to watch as a parent. She has sacrificed enough and done her part. Now it's time for her to go to school. We moved here from Worcester specifically for the school, something we've not experienced yet. This is unacceptable. There are no studies that show schools are high transmission areas. If anything, a controlled environment where kids see the same small amount of kids every day is much safer than sending kids to learning pods. Enough of the fear-mongering. Next, we hear from Suzanne Lovejoy on 3 Juniper Lane in Holden. Please first let me thank everyone for your dedication to the school district. As both a parent and a parent of a student at WRHS and an employee of WRSD, I'd like to request that hybrid learning be postponed if newly creative, extensive metrics show that postponement fulfills the results. The metrics were requested many times by a school committee and developed and presented at December 21st. At this point, it seems that some well-intentioned commentators do not want to follow these metrics as it determines for remaining remote. Please do not change the plan I've set in place in December to ensure safety for students, employees, community, and beyond. Overburdened hospitals, for example. My youngest daughter is a senior this year, and she's successfully navigating remote learning. She's gained skills in many areas with independence and self-advocacy. My serious underlying medical conditions make me high risk for COVID, which concerns both myself and my doctor, even with the PPE provided by the district. I'm hoping the vaccine arrives sooner rather than later for my older colleagues and those with pre-existing conditions. Though it's my plan to return to the job I love, the recent extreme increases in corona cases, in addition to close contacts and tracing limitations, as well as unpredictable happenings that cannot be avoided in an elementary school setting, make me question, why now? As the threat of COVID spread is much more dangerous and vaccines are so near. As indicated by a recent parent survey, most students are doing well in remote learning. Also, I know some children in other districts who are distressed about being in hybrid school with the stringent mask rules and extensive limitations on true social interactions. Unfortunately, social and emotional learning during hybrid is not a positive experience for all. I believe that the extension of hybrid learning will be the safest path to move forward, not only for my family, but for our school community and the community as a whole. Respectfully, Suzanne. Again, from Philip Grasowitz on 14 Laurel Lane in Princeton. Will younger children be exempted from testing? I'm assuming he's meaning pool testing, or will there be less intrusive testing for younger students? If kids are traumatized by testing, it will be impossible for them to go to school. From Nicole Daly at 35 Kilbourne Road in Sterling. Dr. McCall stated at school committee tonight that buildings will deep clean on Wednesday afternoons. As a teacher, this is contrary to information I received from Jeff Carlson in a December 30th email saying that the disinfectant fogging will not be done on Wednesday afternoons. It's also different from my information my principal shared that said fogging will happen in our buildings Monday through Friday evenings. Kristen Naiman, 21 Michael Drive in Rutland. I'd like to politely ask the district consider sending an email to all staff and families prior to 119 outlining the health and safety protocols we might follow. I realize this has been shared in various places, but having the most important aspects for health and safety in one place would be very important. Specifically to highlight hand hygiene, wearing masks, hand hygiene surrounding entering and exiting, hand hygiene surrounding entering and exiting classrooms, sanitation of desks and tables surrounding eating and switching of students, and mask protocols. Thank you for the consideration to highlight some of the most important ways to mitigate COVID spread prior to the hybrid opening. From Ryan McMullen in Princeton, in regards to pool testing, will the percentage of each respective community that consents to testing and conversely decline testing be published so they may assess the impact and validity of interpreting cases of such testing? And that is the public comment for this evening. If you have items of new business you'd like to put on a future agenda, that is best done via email because it gets very convoluted when we all start shouting at each other. And I will do my best. Sometimes I can't put all the new business on one agenda, so we need to split it between two because as you see, we're at 10:30 tonight. And if we put everything on one agenda, we will be here all night. So everything will be done timely. If we need to have extra meetings to get everyone's business request on agendas, we will, but they cannot all be done at once. So all the business be emailed to me, hopefully within the next 24 hours or so. And with that being,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
it's been moved and seconded. Member Ayala.
Ayala, yes.
Member Bennett.
Bennett, yes.
Member Brown.
Brown, yes.
Dennis.
Dennis, yes.
Member Gustafson.
Yes.
Member Haber.
Haber, yes.
Member Ember.
Ember, yes.
Member Kirschenbaum.
Kirschenbaum, yes.
Member Lavoy.
Lavoy, yes.
Member Longbelial.
Longbelial, yes.
Member Mills.
Mills, yes.
Member Otmar.
Otmar, yes.
Member Pantos.
Pantos, yes.
Member Shapiro.
Shapiro, yes.
Member Silva.
Silva, yes.
Member Smith.
Smith, yes.
Member Sullivan.
Sullivan, yes.
Member Williamson.
Williamson, yes.
Member Woodland.
Woodland, yes.
The chair votes yes. I'll see you all in 2 weeks. Thank you so much for a great meeting tonight.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you, guys.